Chapter 1057. This is the Master of Fate. This great realm definitely has its own detailed divisions. For example, being able to control the laws of fate and being unable to control it. Although they are both known as Masters of Fate, lives and death, they are two different realms. Clearly, the existence from the forces of power from the four great true worlds keeping a lookout over the barren lands of the barren lands could cover the endless galaxy with just one stretch of his palm. He chased after me until I fled back to the foreign lands, and what he showed was an unimaginably powerful physical power. But he doesn't know the laws of fate. Since that's the case, I understand that the main focus of his realm is the mastery of the palm. For the time being, I can call him a person who has mastered Mastery Realm. And right now, Heaven Traverser's progenitor has used the supreme treasure at the center of his brows to forcefully control the fate of the world outside. But in truth, his true strength is only in Mastery Realm, and he is not as good as the one in the past. He has only reached a small success. If that's the case, then I understand what it means to be a master of fate, lives, and death. There's a Mastery Realm within it. This realm is the limit of power. If I can break through it, I will be able to step into Fate Realm. Mastery in this realm means that I will be able to control my own fate. If that's the case, then there will definitely be Life Realm and the final Death Realm. Only those who have perfected Death Realm can truly be called Masters of Fate, Lives, and Death. The light of understanding shone in Su Ming's eyes. To be able to learn these things and understand the true usage of the execution of three banes, it's all worth it. Su Ming looked coldly at Heaven Traverser's progenitor, who was walking towards him with a presence that made him seem as if he was looking down on the entire world. He lifted his right hand slowly. Next, I'd like to see just how much of a difference there is between my current fusion of three clones and you, Heaven Traverser's progenitor, who has already perfected Mastery Realm. When Su Ming lifted his head, he clenched his right hand into a fist. He did not retreat, but moved forward instead, turning into a long arc that charged towards Heaven Traverser's progenitor. Ikang's illusory shadow manifested behind him. As the galaxy swayed violently, a vast presence erupted from Su Ming's body with a bang, and he drew closer to Heaven Traverser's progenitor. In the blink of an eye, the two of them crashed into each other, and each of them threw a punch. Those in Mastery Realm did not use their divine abilities or spells, but with just a lift of their hands, they possessed the supreme power of the world. Boom! As a loud bang shook the sky and earth, Su Ming coughed up a mouthful of blood and staggered backwards. The Ikang tree swayed even further, and Su Ming was forced back several thousands of feet, but before he could stop, killing intent shone in the eyes of Heaven Traverser's progenitor. With a cold harumph, he took a step forward again. He might have looked calm, but his heart was filled with shock. He might have only used half of his power in that punch just then, but that half of his power was enough to kill all those in Solar Culpa Realm. In fact, he could even break a divine ability in Solar Culpa Realm and kill them with a single punch. However, when it landed on Su Ming's body, it only made him cough up blood, shatter his internal organs with great difficulty, and make him fall back. This was something that Heaven Traverser's progenitor did not want to accept, but at the same time, the killing intent in his heart became stronger. No one would want their race to have such a great enemy still alive. That was why as he took a step forward, Heaven Traverser's progenitor lifted his right hand. This time, he used all of his power, intending to end the battle with one punch. He was so quick that before Su Ming could gain his footing, he closed in on him. When he hurled his fist forward, the universe roared, and an indescribable power erupted from the progenitor's fist. The galaxy trembled. In fact, all the cultivation planets in the galaxy trembled at that moment. Even the four cultivators who were slightly further away shuddered as they charged forward. They turned their heads around swiftly, and shock appeared on their faces. If anyone lowered their heads to look from the highest spot in the galaxy, they would see that the galaxy had turned into a gigantic fist. As that fist roared, it charged towards Su Ming. All of this might have seemed to have happened over a long period of time, But in truth, at the moment Heaven Traverser's progenitor's fist landed, the fist in the galaxy closed in on Su Ming. Su Ming's pupils shrank. A life-threatening sense of danger instantly filled his entire body. At that moment, the most rational thing for him to do was to immediately execute the next part of his plan and avoid this fatal disaster. However, Su Ming did not do so. Monstrous fighting spirit appeared in his eyes, and his rationality was replaced by impulsiveness, which was a rare sight. This impulsiveness was not recklessness, but a fighting spirit so strong that he could not control it. He wanted to fight. Even if his opponent was someone in Mastery Realm, he still wanted to fight. Even if his body and soul would be destroyed, when he faced the punch from Heaven Traverser's progenitor, he still had a fighting spirit that wanted to fight against him. The strength of that fighting spirit caused Su Ming's eyes to turn bloodshot. When he threw his head back and roared, he had the urge to personally face the progenitor and see just how strong those in Mastery Realm were, even if he died. I've already run away once when I faced those in Mastery Realm. This time, I won't run away. I will fight against them. Su Ming clenched his right fist. As the fighting spirit in his body surged into the sky, it stirred up the unyielding will in Su Ming's personality. Death might be terrifying, but Su Ming believed that running away was even more terrifying. He wanted to fight, and he wanted to throw this punch. He did not care about any consequences, did not care about whether he would die. All of his thoughts were gathered in this punch. He had a strong feeling that if he could throw this punch, and if he did not die this time, then his state of mind would increase once again, and even his soul would become stronger. It was as if he had broken some sort of shackles and broken through some sort of limitation. It was a metamorphosis of his state of being. I want to fight. Su Ming lifted his right hand. His expression was ferocious, and his eyes were bloodshot. I want to fight. He swung his right fist forward, and the Akang shadow behind him instantly gained corporeal form, as if an invisible vortex had appeared on Su Ming's right hand, and it was guiding the gigantic Akang shadow behind him towards his right fist. I want to fight. Su Ming threw his head back and roared. At the instant he hurled his right fist forward, his body disappeared and was replaced by a gigantic tree that existed in the galaxy. It was an incomparably huge tree, and at that moment it was twisting. All the branches were intertwined together to form a gigantic fist, and it crashed into the galaxy fist formed by Heaven Traverser's progenitor's punch, which had already closed in on Su Ming. Boom! An indescribably deafening sound reverberated through the galaxy, the 100-something cultivation planets, and the entire divine essence star ocean. It also caused the 4 cultivators in the distance to tremble, and blood flowed out of their eyes, ears, nose, and mouth. Their organs were shaken to the point that they were in intense pain. Akang's tree crumbled. It turned into an endless amount of tree shards and crumbled. As it did so, Su Ming's body was revealed. Overlapping shadows appeared on his body, and his cultivation-based clone was the first to be chased away. It fell backwards. Soon after, his clone that practiced the art of swallowing hollow shadows whole also split up from Su Ming's body in an overlapping state and tumbled back 100,000 feet. The fusion of the 3 clones was forcefully scattered under the full-powered strike from Heaven Traverser's progenitor. Su Ming's 3 clones coughed up a huge mouthful of blood at the same time. As their faces turned pale, they staggered. But he did not die, because most of the impact had been neutralized by his Akang clone, and Akang's state of being was described in the ballad. It was an eternal existence, and this sort of injury was not enough to kill it. Heaven Traverser's progenitor's expression was dark. He stood where he was and did not sway in the slightest. But only he knew that the pinky on his right hand had become numb for one breath after it crashed into Su Ming's fist. It might have only been one breath, but based on his knowledge, this was impossible. He was an almighty in Mastery Realm, and Mastery Realm was the representation of the supreme power in the world. It was a barrier that could not be shaken by cultivators whose level of cultivation was lower than his. However, the numbness he felt just now was real. It was as if a crack had appeared on a sturdy barrier, and this caused the killing intent in the Heaven Traverser's progenitor's gaze as he looked at Su Ming to become even stronger. Today, you will definitely die. Killing intent shone in the Heaven Traverser's progenitor's eyes, and he took a step forward once again. This time, he brought out more power than he could muster. This was the first time he brought out his strongest power ever since he became a master of fate, lives, and death. As he moved forward, the galaxy shattered with cracking sounds. This was a sign that it could no longer withstand his existence. Su Ming smiled. He wiped off the blood at the corners of his mouth, and the three clones instantly fused together once again. This time, he did not continue fighting back, but immediately retreated. His actions fell into the Heaven Traverser's progenitor's eyes, and it turned into a cold sneer in his heart. In Divine Essence Star Ocean, the people he wanted to kill would not be able to escape. However, Su Ming's subsequent actions caused the Heaven Traverser's progenitor's pupils to shrink. Su Ming lifted his right hand and swung it forward. Sand Earthling Spirit, my first request to you is to kill this person. If you can't kill him, then trap him for a month. When he said these words, the Heaven Traverser's progenitor's expression changed drastically. He sensed a vast power surging towards him from all directions with a bang. This power was rather familiar to him, and it made him remember many things. It also caused his expression to change drastically. He took a step forward and instantly disappeared. When he reappeared, he was already behind Su Ming. He lifted his right hand, intending to immediately kill Su Ming. However, almost at the instant his fist was about to land behind Su Ming, who did not even bother dodging, a layer of fine sand appeared between his fist and Su Ming's body. With a bang, the Heaven Traverser's progenitor's fist landed on the fine sand. Booming sounds swiftly reverberated in space, and the fine sand behind Su Ming turned into a gigantic palm made of sand. The galaxy trembled, and a gigantic face appeared. That face belonged to the Sand Earthling's ancestral spirit, who Su Ming had killed in order to obtain a spot in the future ballot. My first request is an existence in the middle stage of Mastery Realm. If I was at the peak of my power, I could kill him, but now I can only trap him. 1 month. I can. Muffled buzzing sounds echoed in the galaxy. The gigantic face and its boundless body formed an indescribable shock, and it was enough to make the hearts of all those who saw it tremble. Sand Earthling's ancestral spirit's progenitor, you were a berserker who had completed Fate Realm in the past, and you still haven't died? I know now. You're already half a step in a life realm. That's why you obtained half a step into eternal life. The Heaven Traverser's progenitor's expression instantly changed drastically. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian. Come and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 1058. This was Su Ming's plan. He wanted to first fight against the Master of Fate and measure his own combat abilities. He wanted to find his direction, and he wanted to find his breakthrough point in challenging the powerful warriors. After that, he would make the first request to the Sand Earthlings. If he could kill them, then he would kill them, and if he could not, then he would trap them so that Su Ming could have a month's time. In truth, Su Ming could have made his first request to the Sand Earthlings and have the Sand Earthlings destroy Heaven Traversers, but after thinking about it, he did not do it. If the Sand Earthlings attacked, then forget about the fact that Heaven Traversers' Masters of Fate would hold him back once they appeared. What awaited Su Ming would still be the same. More importantly, Su Ming wanted an eye for an eye. He did not want to just kill them. He wanted the entire Heaven Traversers to pay the price for chasing down Tian Xiezi in the past. He wanted them to die while they fled. Perhaps from Heaven Traversers' perspective, Su Ming's actions were unpardonable and heinous. He would be condemned by the world, and he was also cold-blooded and cruel. After all, the people who had chased down Tian Xiezi in the past were the powerful warriors of Heaven Traversers, not their own people. However, Su Ming still did it. It did not matter whether it was the powerful warriors or their own race. They were all Heaven Traversers. In Su Ming's eyes, there was no good or evil. He only believed that he should do this, and then he would continue doing it, even if his actions were illogical to others, filled with malice, and were temperamental. Yet Su Ming still wanted to do it. This was his stubbornness, and this was his way of thinking. He was reasonable, but he was the one who set these reasons. He was also a man of principles, but he was also the one who set these principles. The core of all his reasons and principles was not to provoke him, not to provoke his friends, not to provoke his family, and not to provoke his master. The price for doing so was the destruction of his entire race. Booming sounds echoed in the galaxy. They were the howls mixed with heaven traversers' progenitors' enraged roars. He was surrounded by an endless amount of sand at that moment, making him look as if he was being hugged by the huge sand person in the galaxy. More sand appeared around heaven traversers' progenitor. After a moment, the sand turned into a huge planet, and the core of that planet was heaven traversers' progenitor. Muffled booms came from the sand planet, but as it grew larger, the sounds were gradually drowned out. The sand spirit's body shrank, and eventually, a gigantic planet appeared before Su Ming. On it was an ancient old man sitting cross-legged. The old man's appearance was that of the sand earthling. He sat cross-legged on the ground, as if he was guarding it, suppressing the trapped heaven traverser's progenitor. The old man, who was the sand spirit, lifted his head to look at Su Ming in the galaxy and said flatly, "I'm already in my weakened state. My power is becoming weaker every day. I can only help you trap this person for a month." His voice contained a sense of decay, as if his aura was slowly decaying. An ancient feeling, along with a thick aura of death, surrounded him. 1 month is enough. Su Ming lowered his head to look at his body. At that moment, he was heavily injured, but he could accept it because the benefits brought to him by those injuries were more than worth it. He could sense that his soul was going through a metamorphosis. He could sense that his Akang clone had come to understand many things after this battle, and his clone that practiced the art of swallowing hollow shadows whole seemed to have come into contact with a power that only those in Mastery Realm could sense in the world. His cultivation-based clone had also gained an epiphany after this battle. More importantly, Su Ming no longer feared those in Mastery Realm. To him, this was incredibly important because in the depths of his heart, he could never forget how he had fled from the forces of power from the 4 great true worlds, keeping a lookout over the barren lands. That Almighty in Mastery Realm had given him a feeling of strength and difficulty in fighting against him that was buried deep in his heart. This feeling was like a seed that existed in Su Ming's heart. One day, it would sprout, and at that time, Su Ming's level of cultivation would also regress due to this shackle. Yet now, as the battle ended, this influence was wiped off from Su Ming's heart. Su Ming turned around and charged into the galaxy in the distance. He did not go to heaven traversers, but to the galaxy beyond it. He was so quick that he disappeared without a trace in the blink of an eye. After a moment, as Su Ming charged through the galaxy, he lifted his right hand and swung his arm. Immediately, the totem of the Duke of Crimson Flame on his arm disappeared. The Duke of Crimson Flame manifested in front of Su Ming and bowed respectfully towards him. "Protect me during this period of time. Carry out the plan I told you about previously," Su Ming said flatly. The Duke of Crimson Flame hesitated for a moment, then lowered his head and voiced his obedience. Then Su Ming patted his storage bag with his right hand. Immediately, 2 long arcs, one yellow and one black, flew out and turned into the bald crane and the abyss dragon before him. These 2 creatures had been locked up in Su Ming's storage bag for many years, and this could be considered as Su Ming's punishment for their actions in Black Ink Planet. Once they appeared, the bald crane immediately lifted its head and screeched shrilly. As it screeched, it looked as if it was crying. "Heavens, this damn guy's locked me up for a total of 12 years, 7 months, and 21 days. I haven't seen any crystals for 12 years, 7 months, and 21 days. I've sinned. Heavens, don't punish me like this. Next time, lock me up in a crystal. I swear that I will cut ties with Su Ming. I swear it." Once the bald crane finished screaming, it glared at Su Ming fiercely. Its face was filled with great bitterness and hatred as it gnashed its teeth. Su Ming, I, the great and handsome Grandpa Crane with a bulging bag, will now part ways with you, and we will never be enemies. Haha, let me tell you, no one can lock me up for 12 years, 7 months, and 21 days, no. The bald crane was roaring furiously, but before it could finish speaking, Su Ming said one sentence flatly, and it immediately felt as if he had seized the bald crane's neck, causing its voice to fall silent. The number of crystals an entire race has. What? What did you say? The bald crane shuddered violently and immediately widened its eyes. A powerful light shone in them as it stared at Su Ming. By the side, the abyss dragon sighed. As it shook its head, it felt that the bald crane was bound to be eaten by Su Ming. No matter how it thought about it, it still felt that it was smarter. At the very least, it did not really like crystals. When it thought of this, the abyss dragon instinctively looked at its stomach. It were the sparkling treasures it had hidden away over the years. Didn't you want to cut ties with me? Leave, Su Ming said flatly. Who said that? Damn it, which bastard said that? I, the bald crane, and the great and handsome Su Ming, who has great power, are the best of brothers in the galaxy. Who wanted to drive a wedge between us? Was it you? The bald crane glared fiercely at the abyss dragon, who was stunned by the side with an innocent look on his face. Didn't you say that we were going to part ways? You can leave now. Su Ming cast a sideways glance at the bald crane with an expressionless face. Damn it all. Just who was it? If I know who is so diabolical, I'll definitely bite him to death. I'll bite his butt. This is too hateful, too shameless. How could a kind-hearted crane like me say such heartless words? Su Ming, we respect each other so much. We love each other so much. Oh no, we're like this. No, there's definitely something wrong with this. The bald crane looked anxious. As it gritted its teeth, it turned its head around and glared at the Duke of Crimson Flame, looking as if it was about to pounce on him. It's you, you old coot. You're jealous of the beautiful relationship between me and my master, you. Su Ming frowned. The bald crane's words were becoming more and more outrageous, and he let out a cold harumph. The bald crane blinked, then immediately grabbed its bare body, looking as if it was too late for regrets. It stared at Su Ming pitifully. Oh, handsome master! Oh, great master! Oh, evil master! This bald crane is wrong. It's all my fault, but there's nothing wrong with the crystals. Are you talking about crystals from a race, just now? Excitement appeared on the bald crane's face. Yes, it's not a normal race. It's one of the 4 venerated races in Divine Essence Star Ocean, and it has accumulated crystals for countless years, Su Ming said calmly. When he said this, the bald crane became so excited that it almost fainted. It swiftly went forward and hugged Su Ming's leg while wailing. Master, this is such a big deal. Don't abandon me and do it on your own. I can count the crystals for you. I promise that I won't be greedy for even a single crystal. I can also help you search for crystals. My nose is very sensitive, and I'm also very fast. Think about it. I'm so fast that once I steal the crystals, I'll run, and no one will be able to catch up to me. Also, I can change. I can turn into a crystal, and no one will be able to tell. Do you really want to join? Su Ming lowered his head and looked at the bald crane. The bald crane quickly nodded and looked at Su Ming in excitement. I'll have to pay a price. When Su Ming said these words, the bald crane was immediately stunned, and it loosened its grip on Su Ming's legs. But I can give you 3/10 of the crystals. Once Su Ming said these words, the bald crane immediately hugged Su Ming's legs and refused to let go. 6/10, it said through gritted teeth. It was already prepared for Su Ming's counteroffer. Deal. You have to listen to everything I say. Su Ming nodded without any hesitation. The bald crane was momentarily stunned, and surprise and bewilderment suddenly rose in its heart. But before it could say anything, Su Ming lifted his right hand and patted his storage bag. As buzzing sounds reverberated in the air, the poisonous wasp containing the God Ascension nectar flew out and stung the bald crane. A thread of God Ascension nectar instantly surged into the bald crane's body. Su Ming quickly lifted his hands and tapped a few spots on the bald crane's body. Immediately, a thick fragrance of God Ascension nectar spread out from the bald crane's body. That fragrance instantly spread in all directions, and the originally calm galaxy was suddenly filled with countless piercing roars. At that moment, the thick fragrance of God Ascension nectar on the bald crane's body had caused it to become the source of madness for all the ferocious beasts in Divine Essence Star Ocean. The Abyss Dragon had originally been watching by the side with the attitude of watching a show, but once it saw this, its body shuddered violently, and it swiftly retreated. The Duke of Crimson Flame's pupils shrank, and without any hesitation, he swiftly retreated. The bald crane was momentarily stunned, then lowered its head to sniff its body before it immediately started screaming as if it had gone mad. God Ascension nectar. Damn it, this is Divine Essence Star Ocean. There are countless ferocious beasts here. As it screamed, it even forgot to call Su Ming Grandpa Crane, which it always used to call Su Ming. If you lure 100,000 ferocious beasts, I'll give you 7/10. If you lure 300,000 ferocious beasts, I'll give you 8/10. If you lure 500,000 ferocious beasts, I'll give you 9/10. If you lure 1,000,000 ferocious beasts, I'll give you 100. Su Ming said flatly. The bald crane instantly shuddered, then gritted its teeth. I'll do it. To be continued. If you like this work, please come and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 1059. It made a ruckus with a tone that Su Ming could not understand. This was the bald crane that had been stimulated by Su Ming saying that 1,000,000 ferocious beasts could obtain 100% of the crystals. The bald crane shuddered, but a powerful light shone in its eyes. That light could melt the universe, overturn the universe, make a weak living creature instantly become incomparably powerful, and make the bald crane descend into madness. Darn it all, I'll do it. I'll do it. I'll do it. I'll do it. The bald crane's eyes were bloodshot by the side as it continued roaring. If the people who were in contact with it knew that it had gone mad because of the stimulation from the crystals, even though it was scared to death, then they would know that it was encouraging itself. But if they did not understand it, then when they saw the bald crane's actions, they would definitely think that this bird was mad. While it roared, it circled around Su Ming and instinctively flapped its wings. Its roars grew stronger, causing the Abyss Dragon to widen its eyes. In its heart, it despised the bald crane for being able to throw caution to the wind for crystals. The noble Lord Abyss Dragon, will not lose my composure for such a small profit. This bald crane might have seemed very smart, but in truth, it's just an idiot. While the Abyss Dragon was mocking the bald crane in its heart, Su Ming's voice suddenly reached its ears. It immediately stunned the Abyss Dragon. Then it started shuddering just like the bald crane. Abyss Dragon, do you remember the dragon tendon you lost in the past? The Abyss Dragon stared at Su Ming with a dumbfounded expression, unable to speak even after a long time had passed. You don't want it? Then forget it. I want it. But the Emperor of Abyss Decree took away my dragon tendon in the past. He's a culpable lord who is a master of fate, lives, and death. Heaven Traversers are one of the 4 venerated races, and they have been able to exist for so many years in Divine Essence Star Ocean. Don't tell me that they don't have masters of fate, lives, and death among them. Su Ming asked faintly. The Abyss Dragon shuddered violently. I can give you a promise. When I leave Divine Essence Star Ocean and settle down in True Morning Dao World, I will head to the Emperor of Abyss True World and let you reunite with Yuxian. I will also snatch back the dragon tendon that was taken from you in past. Su Ming said calmly. I'll do it, I'll do it. As the Abyss Dragon shuddered, its eyes turned bloodshot. Even in its dreams, it wanted to seize its tendon back so that it would no longer be like this. I don't need you to lure the ferocious beasts. You just need to run with the bald crane. Just like the bald crane, if you lure 100,000 ferocious beasts, I'll give you 7/10. If you lure 300,000 ferocious beasts, I'll give you 8/10. If you lure 500,000 ferocious beasts, I'll give you 9/10. If you lure 1,000,000 ferocious beasts, I'll give you 100. I'm talking about dragon tendon. Once Su Ming finished speaking, the roaring bald crane came to a halt. When it looked at Su Ming, a sentimental look appeared on its face, and it thought in its heart that Su Ming really treated it well. He was worried about its safety, which was why he sent the abyss dragon to keep it company. All right, bald crane, whether or not we can get crystals will depend on your actions. A hint of encouragement appeared in Su Ming's eyes. This was the first time the bald crane saw such a gaze, and it instantly became excited. It had a growing feeling that Su Ming was really good to it. Blood rushed to its head, and with the stimulation of crystals, it immediately let out a loud roar and rushed forward. The abyss dragon's eyes were bloodshot. It followed the bald crane and charged forward swiftly. Its goal was the 1,000,000 ferocious beasts. After all, what it wanted was not crystals. It did not matter how many crystals there were, as they were all crystals. However, if there was one section missing of dragon tendon and it only gave 7/10, then it would no longer be dragon tendon. For a period of time, only Su Ming and the Duke of Crimson Flame were left in the galaxy. The Duke of Crimson Flame looked at the bald crane and the abyss dragon leaving into the distance with a pitying gaze, then shook his head. Su Ming sat down cross-legged in the galaxy and averted his gaze to look in the direction of heaven traversers. After a long while, he gradually closed his eyes and immersed himself in meditation and training. Su Ming might not know all of the bald crane's abilities, but he could somewhat guess its origins. He knew that no matter how much it struggled, unless it ran into a ferocious spirit at the level of a Kang, it would not die. Besides, Su Ming had controlled the amount of God Ascension nectar he had infused into the bald crane. This tiny amount was not enough to lure out a ferocious beast at the level of a Kang. More importantly, Su Ming had left a wisp of Atman in the bald crane's body, and he could clearly know all of its actions. This was something Su Ming had left behind after he left Black Ink Planet, because of the bald crane's reputation as one of the dual fiends. At that moment, as Su Ming closed his eyes and trained, he also focused on the Atman that had fused into the bald crane's body, as if he was multitasking. If the bald crane ran into danger that it could not resolve, then he would immediately have the Duke of Crimson Flame shifted. As the bald crane roared, it brought with it a presence that said it would not turn back until it reached its goal. It charged forward like a shooting star. The abyss dragon followed behind it in a similarly frenzied manner. At that moment, these two old partners could be said to be risking everything. One of them was for crystals, and the other was for dragon tendon. With a stirring and stirring tone, they spread out a thick layer of God Ascension nectar and were like a bright lamp in the dark of the galaxy, attracting the attention of all the ferocious beasts. After the time it takes for an incense stick to burn, muffled growls came from the space before them. 3 gigantic void beasts manifested in the galaxy. Their bodies were like crocodiles, and once they appeared, they fixed their gazes on the bald crane and the abyss dragon, who had flashed past them in the distance. With a loud roar, the 3 void beasts rushed out and chased after the bald crane. The fragrance of the God Ascension nectar stimulated them so much that they went mad. Come, darn it all, come on, I'll be waiting for you. The fear in the bald crane's heart had reached its peak, but had also been stimulated to its limits by the crystals. That was why in its madness, it continued roaring as it charged forward, as if this was the only way it could vent its fear and stir up even more passion in it. As it roared, the bald crane and the abyss dragon turned into 2 long arcs and charged forward in the inner part of Divine Essence Star Ocean. Gradually, a swarm of flying snakes that looked like pythons but had human faces and had 2 weapons on their backs closed in from the distance. There were tens of thousands of these ferocious beasts, and their tails trembled. Their eyes had turned crimson because of the stimulation from the God Ascension nectar. With a monstrous flame burning in them, They charged towards the bald crane as if they had gone mad. After a moment, booming sounds reverberated in the air from a spot further away. A dense swarm of spotted poisonous wasps that were the size of a person closed in on them while buzzing. The bald crane let out a loud roar and turned around, changing its direction to charge forward once again. It was still traveling at its fastest speed. There were already nearly 100,000 ferocious beasts behind it, and they were chasing after it as if they had gone mad. If the bald crane and the abyss dragon were slightly slower, they would immediately be caught up to. "How many are there now?" The bald crane roared. At that moment, most of its heart was occupied by fear, and the thought of giving up rose in it. 100,000. The abyss dragon quickly said from behind the bald crane. It was also incredibly afraid, and the murderous presence from the ferocious beasts behind it caused it to tremble. "Darn all, why is it so little?" The bald crane was conflicted. It did not even have 300,000. It was afraid that Su Ming would not give it the crystals, but when it remembered that it had already become bait, it could not do it for nothing. It gritted its teeth, moved, and continued charging in another direction. As it ran, it roared. The fragrance of the god Ascension nectar spread further into the distance as the bald crane continued moving about in divine essence star ocean. About an hour later, as roars echoed in the air, hundreds of giants walked over from the distant galaxy. Each of them was nearly 100,000 feet tall, and they held huge logs in their hands. They had no eyes on their faces, only a huge mouth. Their hair was made up of countless thin threads that were shaped like snakes, and, as they fell on their shoulders, a primordial presence that was incredibly great spread out from them. Behind them were nearly 100,000 ferocious beasts of all shapes and sizes. At that moment, with a madness that had never been seen before, they charged forward like a tidal wave. The roars of all the ferocious beasts shook divine essence star ocean, stirring up a storm that had not appeared in divine essence star ocean for a long time. "How many?" The bald crane shuddered. As it flew forward, it roared. "Almost 300,000. Huh." The abyss dragon was halfway through its sentence when it suddenly stopped and looked ahead in terror. At that moment, the bald crane also saw it. The galaxy before them was roaring, and an endless amount of ripples had appeared. These ripples were formed by more than 10,000 whirlwinds. Those whirlwinds were tens of thousands of feet tall, and they were swiftly sweeping towards them from the front. If anyone took a closer look, they would be able to vaguely see purplish-red objects the size of a palm in those whirlwinds. They were spinning rapidly to form whirlwinds. In fact, the galaxy behind them looked as if it was about to shatter. There were more than 100,000 ferocious beasts that looked like black elephants charging towards them with brutal intent and madness. 300,000. 400,000. There are definitely more than 400,000 ferocious beasts. The abyss dragon immediately roared. It could not see the end of the swarm of beasts before it, and neither could it see the edge of the swarm behind it. In its eyes, the front and the back were filled with ferocious beasts, and there was no end to them. It could not even tell just how large the area was. Darn it all, why is it 400,000? The bald crane was about to go mad. As it roared, it became conflicted in its heart again. If there were 300,000, it would choose to immediately lead the swarm of ferocious beasts to complete its mission without any hesitation. But there were 400,000. It was just a little bit away from 500,000, and it could get 9/10. The bald crane scratched its bald head with all its might. As it gritted its teeth, it let out a loud roar and did not choose to leave. Instead, it changed its direction and charged deeper into divine essence star ocean at a maddening speed. The abyss dragon gritted its teeth as well. As it changed its body, it turned into a huge dog and fled with the bald crane. == requesting recommendation votes to be continued. If you like this work, please come to cast recommendation votes or monthly votes. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 1060. In the depths of Divine Essence Star Ocean were 3 planets that were connected to each other due to some unknown reason over time. Xianshang and his group of 4 were moving forward carefully. Their expressions were incredibly wary, and they would occasionally size up their surroundings. I think there's something off. There's a brutal presence in this galaxy. The person called Yin said in a low voice. Perhaps it's because of the battle between those 2 terrifying people just now. Lower your voice. Based on the map, there are inferno beasts in this connected planet. These ferocious beasts are usually in deep sleep. As long as we don't disturb them, we'll be fine. The 4 of them were silent. In their nervousness, they slowly approached the connected planets. Their actions made it clear that they were after some sort of item in the planet, or else they could have gone around it and avoided it. Is the map accurate? Is there really a flame fiend here? It should be. We saw it on the way here. As long as we can get the flame fiend's blood here, we'll be able to pass through scorching sun road that leads to dust burners. The 4 of them spoke to each other in low voices. At the instant they slowly approached the connected planets, a piercing roar suddenly came from within the connected planets. That voice contained a brutal and fiery presence, causing the expressions of the 4 people to change drastically. Without any hesitation, they swiftly retreated and executed their divine abilities. In their nervousness, they were already prepared for a huge battle. Yet the scene they saw next caused the 4 of them to instantly lose all will to fight. Terror appeared on their faces, and they executed a speed that was almost equivalent to when they were avoiding Su Ming. All of them coughed up blood and immediately used blood escape, intending to quickly leave the place. Because they saw, at that moment, there were shadows of fire rushing out from the connected planets while roaring. Within those shadows were ferocious beasts that looked like wolves. They were in packs, and there were more than 100,000 of them. They charged out together, and this scene was enough to shock all those who saw it. Behind them were tens of thousands of living beings in human form. Their bodies were surrounded by flames, and it could be seen that there were indeed people within the flames. However, their eyes were gray, and there were no signs of life within them. However, there was no aura of death either. Some of them had wings, some were cultivators, and some were from the alien races in Divine Essence realm. All of them had been killed by the ferocious beasts in the connected planets over the course of countless years, and their bodies had been possessed by the flame fiend. This scene was enough to make the 4 cultivators' scalps go numb. The shadow of death engulfed their minds. Even though they had used blood escape, a bitter smile still appeared on their faces. They didn't even have the time to feel regret and were ready to self-destruct. Even if they were to die, they didn't want to become that puppet and be possessed by the fire fiend. However, the 100,000-something fire wolves and the tens of thousands of puppets possessed by the flame fiends did not even spare a glance at the 4 people standing at their door. Instead, as they roared, they charged in a single direction as if they had gone mad. The 4 cultivators were right next to the group of beasts, and they could only stare blankly as the beasts flew off into the distance. When the beasts disappeared into the distance, they were completely stunned. The 4 of them looked at each other, dumbfounded. What happened? Xianshang mumbled after the 4 of them remained silent for some time. Could it be that a supreme treasure has appeared in the world? The cultivator called Yunyu immediately asked, and his eyes shone with a brilliant light. That should be the case, or else it would be impossible for the flame fiends to ignore us like this. That's right. By the looks of it, they should be in a great hurry. They've definitely come out of their nest. The 4 of them looked at each other and saw the excitement in each other's eyes. A glint appeared in their eyes, and they immediately turned into 4 long arcs that charged towards the connected planets. After a moment, when they flew out, there was excitement on their faces. Clearly, they had not expected that their trip would go so smoothly. They had successfully obtained the blood they needed in the connected planets. It might not be very fresh, but it was enough. At that moment, there was a choice before them. They could either leave and head to dust burners, or chase after the flame fiends and see just what sort of supreme treasure it was. However, the latter was dangerous. However, cultivators existed in the universe, and as they grew, they would run into all sorts of dangers. The four of them whispered to each other for a moment before they made their choice. They turned into long arcs and charged in the direction where the flame fiends had left at full speed. They wanted to see just what sort of supreme treasure it was. If they had the chance to obtain it, it would be for the best, but if they did not, it would still be better than running away from it. They had already obtained the flame fiend's blood, and they could move freely. Once they ran into danger, they did not need to worry about anything else. They could just flee at full speed. In fact, they had already discussed where they would meet up if they split up. As the four of them charged forward, they chased after the flame fiend's tracks at full speed. About 2 hours later, their footsteps came to an abrupt halt. They had already been left dumbfounded once on that day, but right then, it had happened a second time. They heard an indescribable roar. It came from a swarm of ferocious beasts that numbered more than 700,000. They let out a roar that surged into the sky at the same time, and they saw an ocean appear in the galaxy in the distance. It was an ocean formed by ferocious beasts. All sorts of ferocious beasts occupied the entire galaxy, and among them were the flame fiends and the others. In fact, the four cultivators did not recognize most of the ferocious beasts in the ocean, but the presence and mighty pressure from the ferocious beasts, along with the ferocious feeling they gave off, made their hearts tremble in fear. The end of the ocean of beasts could not be seen. They could only see a bald crane being chased madly at the front of the swarm, and behind it was a huge dog that had its tongue stuck out as it fled with no regard for its life. The four cultivators could not help but stare at the incredibly dazzling bald crane in a daze as it swayed its butt and lured the swarm of beasts in an incredibly coquettish manner. "It's in heat," one of the four cultivators instinctively asked. Immediately after, they heard the bald crane's loud roar coming from the distance. "Darn it all, come on. Chase me. I'll kill all of you. I'm invincible. I'm the mightiest crane in the world." The bald crane had already broken down in its extreme fear. It could only continue roaring loudly so that it would not fall limp from fear. "I've walked the land of wanderers, and there's nothing I haven't run into." "You're nothing. I'm the bird. Come on, come on. Make the swarm of beasts even fiercer. I'll kill all of you." The bald crane roared and swayed its butt vigorously to fly even faster. The abyss dragon behind it had already reached its limit and was incredibly tired, but it did not dare to relax. The swarm of beasts behind it made it feel that if it relaxed, it would immediately be torn to shreds. "Darn it all, why didn't I notice that I'm so fast before?" This was not the first time the abyss dragon had this question appear in its mind as it charged forward. It did not know that its speed and that of the bald crane had been continuously surrounded by Su Ming's divine sense. This was one of the reasons why Su Ming dared to have them lure the swarm of beasts. Most of their fatigue had already been taken away by Su Ming and the Duke of Crimson Flame, or else the bald crane and the abyss dragon would have been caught a long time ago. "How many do you have? Tell me." The bald crane roared loudly as the swarm of beasts behind it fled. 700 to 800,000. I'll give you more, no less," the abyss dragon immediately roared. Damn it, damn it. The bald crane was conflicted once again. It did not dare turn its head back to look, afraid that if it did, it would immediately faint from fear. "How many crystals do you think a venerated race has?" the bald crane quickly asked in its conflicted state. "At least 30 to 50 million. The abyss dragon turned its head around and cast a glance at the swarm of beasts behind it. It was already regretting agreeing to Su Ming's request. To it, this was the same as playing with its life. If it was the slightest bit careless, it would die here. Darn it all. When the bald crane heard this, it immediately became excited. The conflict in its heart instantly disappeared, and its eyes were completely replaced by the light from the crystals. "Right now, I can get 9/10, and if I lose 10%, I'll lose 3 to 5 million crystals. I won't allow it. I won't allow myself to lose 3 to 5 million crystals. I'm going all out. Abyss dragon, do you want to get one less dragon tendon? Darn all, what is one less dragon tendon? That's a belt. Your tendon is the belt." When the abyss dragon heard this, it instantly flew into a rage. I want those 3 to 5 million crystals. The bald crane roared furiously. I don't want a belt. The abyss dragon roared as well. The two old partners cast each other a glance, then charged forward madly. They changed their direction to lure even more beasts into the swarm. The sea of beasts behind them surged into the sky. The galaxy trembled, and it was as if a windstorm had swept through the galaxy. When they left into the distance, the four cultivators stared at the scene in the distance with a dumbfounded expression. They had vaguely heard the bald crane's words, but their words were very indistinct, and they could not understand the details. At that moment, when they looked towards the bald crane, their gazes were filled with fear and shock. That crane is definitely a very powerful existence in divine essence Star Ocean. Yes, it must have done something that the other beasts cannot tolerate. That's why it's being hunted like this. That dog is pretty pitiful. It must have been dragged into this, but judging by their looks, they don't seem too willing. But no matter what, they are definitely famous beasts in divine essence Star Ocean. Once I have enough power, I will definitely subdue a ferocious beast like this. The four people cast each other a glance, and fascination appeared on their faces. In the depths of their hearts, they worshipped the bald crane. Clearly, in their eyes, it was an incredibly amazing thing for a crane to be chased by 1 million ferocious beasts in divine essence Star Ocean. There were more than 1 million ferocious beasts behind the bald crane and the abyss dragon. However, since the bald crane did not dare turn its head back to look, it did not know that the abyss dragon had an innate defect when it came to counting. Not even Su Ming had noticed this defect. At that moment, sweat broke out on his face. By his side, the Duke of Crimson Flame's face was also pale. They had attacked at full strength, which was why the bald crane and the abyss dragon could maintain their speed, but now, there were already 1 million of them, but they were still luring them. Damn it. What is it doing? Su Ming shouted in anger. To be continued. If you like this work, please come Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 1061. 800,000. That's not right. I think it's only 700,000 something. Darn it all, it was already 700,000 something just now. Do you even know how to count? As the bald crane and the abyss dragon roared at each other, an endless sandstorm suddenly rose in the galaxy before them. The sandstorm was formed by a group of meteors charging towards them. At first glance, these meteors might seem like stones, but if anyone took a closer look, they would find that they had faces that looked like humans. They were clearly people made of stone. Once they huddled together, they turned into meteors. At that moment, they were charging swiftly towards the bald crane and the abyss dragon. There was no end to their numbers, and there were more than 100,000 of them. The bald crane widened its eyes. At the same time, it let out a shrill cry. It heard the abyss dragon's voice behind it. 800,000 something. This time, I'm certain that it's 800,000 something. There's no way I'm wrong. The bald crane turned around swiftly and looked behind it for the first time, but when it did so, it nearly fainted. There was a dense and endless swarm of beasts behind it. All those with the slightest bit of experience and ability to count would definitely be able to tell that there were more than 1 million of them, even if they could not tell the exact number at first glance. Darn it all. The bald crane did not know how to express the feeling of separation and indignation in its heart at that moment. With a loud roar, it charged into the distance. It had already decided that it would no longer lure the ferocious beasts in this place. Since their numbers had already reached 1 million, then it would leave. It traveled in the direction Su Ming had originally asked it to go, and it was so fast that it looked like a burning shooting star slicing through the galaxy with a loud bang. It's only 800,000 something. It's still lacking a little. Bald crane, you can take less crystals, but I don't want a belt. When the abyss dragon saw the bald crane fleeing, it immediately knew what it was planning to do. It became nervous and anxious. The bald crane was in a fit of anger and ignored the abyss dragon's words. It simply did not want to bother with this mutt that did not know how to count and had nearly caused its death. Bald crane, The abyss dragon roared. "You idiot, you mutt. Why you? Go back and count it carefully. I can tell with just one glance that there are at least 1 million beasts in this swarm. And you're telling me that there are only 800,000? Are you trying to kill me?" The bald crane roared, and without even turning its head back, it charged forward once more. The abyss dragon was momentarily stunned, and its heart immediately became anxious. It remembered what Yu Xian had told him in the past. It seemed that there were some flaws in its calculations, in its awkwardness. It immediately fell silent. It lowered its head and followed behind the bald crane, gritting its teeth as it charged forward. If anyone cast their gazes over the galaxy, they would be able to see an incredibly magnificent sight. It was a swarm of beasts that had rarely appeared in Divine Essence Star Ocean over the years. They occupied the endless galaxy, and they were like seawater that roared and tumbled about as they chased after the bald crane and the abyss dragon. There were all sorts of ferocious beasts in the swarm, and even the weakest among them were in Heaven Cultivation Realm. In fact, some of the stronger ones were equivalent to those in Solar Culpa Realm, but that was not important. Even a normal master of fate, lives, and death's pupils would shrink when they saw the number of beasts in the swarm. Even though they could resist it, it would still be quite troublesome. When their numbers reached a certain level, the cultivation of each individual didn't matter much. Only the aura and impact of the whole could shatter all barriers. In the midst of this madness, all living beings and races would have to face the danger of their race being wiped out, especially when there were not exactly 1 million of them. In truth, there were more than 1,500,000 of them. Even though there were countless ferocious beasts in Divine Essence Star Ocean, and these 1 million-something beasts were just a drop in the bucket, they were just living beings in a small region. However, to Heaven Traversers, who only had 100,000-something people, this was a disaster that their tribe had never seen before. They had lived in this place for countless years, but they had never seen such a swarm of beasts before. In the past, having 100,000-something, or even several 100,000, was already their limit, and they were all in one race. Now, there were many races and a large number of ferocious beasts that formed a sea of beasts that could crush all willpower. The bald crane was determined to obtain the crystals. It did not care about its fatigue and had a will that said it would not turn back until it obtained the crystals. With a fearless expression on its face, it rushed towards Heaven Traversers like a solemn and stirring song. Only the bald crane itself knew the tragic air contained within it. But when all of this was compared to the crystals, it immediately turned into an impulse in its heart. 50 million crystals. 50 million crystals. They're all mine. Darn it all. Isn't it just luring monsters? Isn't it just attracting the attention of those ferocious beasts? I've long since gotten used to it. Why did I say I'm used to it? As the bald crane fled for its life, it let out low growls. But as it did so, for some unknown reason, it found that it had a feeling. It was a feeling that it had often led a large swarm of ferocious beasts to charge forward, just like what it was doing now. That feeling seemed to have been buried in the depths of its memories, and it would usually not show up even when it was in life-threatening danger. Only when it was in a unique state of familiarity would it be able to vaguely sense it. Could it be that I've always done things that would make anyone's hair stand on end, which is why I've always been chased after? The bald crane blinked in surprise. Based on its understanding of itself, this seemed to be a very, very possible possibility. As the bald crane thought about it, it turned its head around and roared based on its feelings. Come on, you bunch of cranes. Come and chase after your grandpa crane. Do you see that, cranes? Your grandpa crane knows how to run. The bald crane was in the face of the endless sea of beasts as it retreated, and to its shock, it discovered that it was even faster in this state. Could it be that I really did this often in the past? The bald crane was slightly excited. It was no longer just flying, but as it flapped its wings, it would start swaying. It would sway here and there, forming curved lines. Because of that, it discovered that not only was it faster, it had also gradually found a feeling in the depths of its heart. As it laughed, The bald crane even swayed its body and opened its mouth to spit nonstop at the sea of beasts chasing after it with bloodshot eyes. "Heh, you bunch of people who are on fire. I just raided your lair and abducted your prettiest girl. Come on, come chase Grandpa Crane. I'll kill all of you. And all of you, you bunch of stone people. What's wrong? Why are you glaring at me? Yo, sooner or later, I'll tear you apart and use you to build a house." I seem to have done this before," the bald crane instinctively said. As it spoke, the familiar feeling became stronger, and it became faster. In fact, its movements became even more practiced. It continued, lowering its head and posing, and a mocking look appeared on its face without it even realizing it. In fact, it even came to a swift halt. When the swarm of beasts was about to drown it, it immediately let out a strange cry and swayed but while cursing. It swayed its body and widened the distance between them again. Occasionally, it would sway to the left and jump to the right. Occasionally, it would even stretch out its claws and use its fingers to provoke them. Its actions, expression, and actions had long since left the abyss dragon dumbfounded. If it wanted to describe the bald crane at that moment, it would have plenty of words, but if it wanted to describe it accurately and directly, then there were only two words: coquettish, despicable crane. In response to the bald crane's coquettish actions were roars that were practically connected together. They were the roars of the entire swarm, and their voices were like waves that shook the galaxy. Louder! The bald crane became excited. The familiar feeling became stronger, and, at that moment, it had almost forgotten about the crystals. As the swarm of beasts roared behind it, it shouted loudly. The abyss dragon stared at the bald crane, and admiration appeared in its eyes. It had never expected that the filthy bald crane would have such courage to act in such a manner. The bald crane's coquettish actions had completely ignited the madness in the sea of beasts. They were no longer purely attracted by the god ascension nectar. In fact, it could be said that even without the god ascension nectar, if the bald crane had done this a long time ago, it would have still been able to complete the task Su Ming had given it. In fact, it might have even attracted more ferocious beasts. Su Ming opened his eyes in the galaxy. He admired the bald crane's courage. In truth, if he had been in its place, Su Ming did not believe that he would have done better than the bald crane. Everyone has their own specialties. This guy is a weirdo. Could it be that before he lost his memories, he often did this? Su Ming was deep in thought. The bald crane flew around in a coquettish manner. Its smug and excited expression made it seem as if it was enjoying luring the sea of beasts. It continued shaking its butt and using its finger to provoke the beasts. It would occasionally berate them loudly, and with its mocking expression, it became the most eye-catching existence in the galaxy. The sea of beasts behind it had already descended into complete madness. They chased after it at an even faster speed, as if they were no longer chasing after the god ascension nectar, but wanted to tear that damned bald crane apart. The abyss dragon's admiration for the bald crane grew stronger. Several days later, when the bald crane stepped into Heaven Traverser's territory, it turned around and let out a loud roar, and that admiration immediately rose to a state of fanaticism. "Kids, we're here. Trample on this place, trample on it. Keep all the pretty girls, no matter what race they are from, and remember to be gentle with all the crystals and treasures. Bring them back to Crying Crane Mountain. Darn it all, we're occupying this place." The bald crane turned its head around and roared at the sea of beasts. The excitement on its face had already reached its peak. Once it finished roaring, it was still puzzled. It seemed that when it spoke like this, the familiar feeling became even stronger. Roar! The roars from the 1,000,000 beasts shook the galaxy and reverberated through the entire Heaven Traverser's territory. Countless Heaven Traversers were shocked awake, and the abyss dragon also roared loudly and stared at the bald crane with a zealous gaze. At that moment, if anyone who did not know the details looked over, they would definitely think that the bald crane was the leader of the sea of beasts. That presence, that coquettish manner, that expression, all of them exuded the presence of a beast. To be continued. If you like this work, please come Achidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 1062. This was a disaster. As one of the 4 venerated races, Heaven Traversers had never seen such a sea of beasts before. When the 1,000,000 beasts rushed into Heaven Traversers' galaxy, not only were all Heaven Traversers shocked, even the sand spirit sitting on the gigantic ball of sand was shocked. The old man stared at the clamoring bald crane in a daze, then at the 1,000,000 beasts behind it, and a wry smile appeared on his face. He finally understood why Su Ming had wanted him to trap Heaven Traverser's progenitor for a month. This crane, I seem to have some impression of it. The old man stared at the bald crane and sank into deep thought. However, he had lived for far too long, and the depth of his memories was not something that he could remember within a short period of time. He needed time to remember them before he could find the thoughts hidden in the passage of time. Heaven Traversers, come out and receive your guests. The bald crane roared smugly and charged into Heaven Traversers' territory. The swarm of beasts behind it surged forward while roaring. In the blink of an eye, they filled the entire galaxy. In fact, the bald crane did not even need to intentionally guide them. The swarm of beasts would just spread out and destroy everything that stood in their way as they chased after them. What the bald crane needed to do was to continue charging forward until it reached the end of Heaven Traversers' territory. Then it would complete its mission. An endless amount of powerful presences erupted from the 100-something cultivation planets within Heaven Traversers' territory at that instant. Tens of thousands of people rushed out of their planets, but when they saw the sea of beasts in the galaxy, their expressions changed drastically. The bald crane looked incredibly smug. As it roared in excitement, it continued charging forward. After a moment, a piercing light suddenly appeared around it and the Abyss Dragon. With a flash, the bald crane and the Abyss Dragon disappeared. Su Ming and the Duke of Crimson Flame stood in the galaxy beyond Heaven Traversers' territory. As they stared at Heaven Traversers' territory, white light shone beside them, and the bald crane and the Abyss Dragon appeared. Almost at the instant they appeared, the Duke of Crimson Flame lifted his right hand, and a sea of fire immediately enveloped the bald crane and the Abyss Dragon. Su Ming swung his right hand, and a sealing power swiftly appeared. With his and the Duke of Crimson Flame's full power, he covered the god Ascension Nectar on the bald crane's body. Crystals! My crystals! The bald crane had just been relocated back, and after being momentarily stunned, it immediately looked towards Su Ming. Su Ming looked at Heaven Traversers in the distance, and a freezing glare shone in his eyes as he said flatly, "Once the wave of beasts is over, you can go and search for crystals." The bald crane blinked and said with slight worry, "No, I have to go now. What if they take me away? You still have the god Ascension Nectar on you. If you go, you'll just be asking for death." Su Ming looked at the bald crane. God sealing nectar? The bald crane licked its lips and sucked in a sharp breath. This action immediately attracted Su Ming's attention. In fact, his expression changed during that instant. He could clearly sense that when the bald crane sucked in a breath, the presence of the god Ascension Nectar on its body instantly disappeared. In fact, it no longer existed in its body, as if it had been completely absorbed. I don't care about this bit of god Ascension Nectar. Look, it's gone now. When the bald crane saw Su Ming's expression, it immediately became smug. It shuddered and turned into the big yellow dog. It even bared its teeth at Su Ming. By the side, the Abyss Dragon had already become incredibly fanatical towards the bald crane. In its eyes, the bald crane was practically omnipotent. Little Su, why aren't you opening the seal and letting me out? I'm telling you, little Su, with every breath you waste, hundreds of crystals will be snatched away by someone else. Those are my crystals. Mine. The bald crane shouted loudly. It believed that it had done a great deed just now and knew that no matter what, Su Ming would not reprimand it, which was why in the midst of its smugness, it started trembling again. Su Ming remained silent for a moment before he smiled wryly and opened the seal. The Duke of Crimson Flame also extinguished his flames, speechless. The bald crane's eyes immediately shone, and it charged towards Heaven Traversers. The Abyss Dragon was in the form of the big black dog at that moment, and it quickly chased after the bald crane. The two mutants were so quick that they did not lose to the speed at which they had fled. They charged straight towards Heaven Traversers. Su Ming could already imagine that their arrival would definitely make Heaven Traversers suffer the most devastating price in terms of crystals due to the disaster. Su Ming shook his head. As he took a step forward, he also walked towards Heaven Traversers, who had been surged into the sea of beasts. He was not fast, but when he stepped into Heaven Traversers' galaxy, the roars and booming sound that surged into the sky charged past his ears like a wave of impact. Su Ming arrived on the gigantic ball of sand where the old sand spirit was. He stood there and stared at the galaxy in the distance before he closed his eyes. He might have closed his eyes, but he spread his divine sense outwards. This was a Kang's divine sense, and it could cover a very large area. He saw the endless number of ferocious beasts roaring. Once they lost the bald crane and were enraged by the bald crane's previous actions, they destroyed everything in the area wantonly. Even though they knew that the bald crane was not related to Heaven Traversers, in their anger, they did not care about this. It did not matter whether it was the beasts fighting against each other or the Heaven Traversers attempting to counterattack. All of them became the trigger for the disaster. A bloody stench filled the air and stimulated even more ferocious beasts to descend into madness. Their attacks destroyed planets, and their slaughter left behind a wound that could not heal on Heaven Traversers. In fact, their acts of killing each other and treating this place as a battlefield also caused great damage to Heaven Traversers. This was a disaster, a bloody feast. Unless Heaven Traversers had a second master of fate, lives, and death, then even a powerful warrior in Solar Culpa realm would not be able to stop the disaster from continuing. Su Ming also saw the bald crane moving through the cultivation planets with the Abyss Dragon. Their appearances continued changing, turning into all sorts of appearances. Sometimes they would roar among the beasts, sometimes they would fly out of the cultivation planets with excitement, and sometimes they would rush into the midst of Heaven Traversers to snatch their storage bags while they were still in shock. Their actions were incredibly arrogant, and since they were hidden in the disaster, they did not attract too much attention. As he watched, Su Ming retrieved his divine sense. There was no longer any need for him to continue watching. Booming sounds were echoing in the ball of sand under his feet. They were the roars and outbursts of Heaven Traversers' progenitor, who had reached the pinnacle of his anger. Clearly, he could sense the changes in the world outside. Heaven Traversers have already paid the price for what happened in the past. Su Ming opened his eyes. I know you can hear me. You are an almighty master of fate, lives, and death, and I am indeed not your opponent, but listen carefully, it won't be easy for you to kill me. Once your race has paid the price for what happened, I will no longer cause trouble for you. But if you chase after me, then you must be prepared to be sealed once again, and your race will be killed by the sea of beasts once again. And if there truly is a second time, then it won't be 1,000,000 ferocious beasts. Instead, I will do everything in my power to lure more of them out, so that you will be the only one left of Heaven Traversers from then on. Then, we will fight to the death. This is my threat to you, Su Ming said flatly. His voice reverberated in the area and seeped through the ground to land in the ears of the trapped Heaven Traversers' progenitor. Almost at the instant Su Ming said those words, the roars and booming sounds in the ground instantly disappeared, turning into dead silence. You are a cultivator from the other worlds. You cultivators talk about practicing Tao, and this Tao is heaven. Practicing the Tao of heaven, luring ferocious beasts to destroy my race, is in line with your Tao. The muffled voice of Heaven Traversers' progenitor came from the ball of sand. After a moment of silence, it traveled out with loud, booming sounds. Tao. Su Ming remained silent. He lifted his head and looked at the galaxy. I have come into contact with quite a number of cultivators from the other worlds in the past, and all almighties have their own Tao. I want to know what your Tao is. For a small matter in the past, and your master did not die either. He has the fifth stone with him, and it is only right that others snatch it from him. Even if I did not attack, there would have been others who would. And you, because of this, wanted to kill my race 1,000 years later. Tell me, what is your Tao? As the muffled voice echoed in the sandball, even the old sand spirit sitting cross-legged opened his eyes and looked towards Su Ming. He, too, wanted to know what Su Ming's Tao was. Su Ming fell silent. You don't have a Tao. You are empty. The progenitor's loud laughter came from the ball of sand. There was an ancient air to it, along with a hint of delight. As it echoed in the air, it caused the ball of sand to tremble. You are a person without a Tao, and neither do you have a Tao heart. There are 3,000 great Taos in the world and 79,000 small Taos, but none of them belong to you. You might seem to be in the Tao of killing, but in truth, you are not. You might seem to be in the Tao of extermination, but the true Tao of extermination is not like this. I lost this battle. Don't worry, I won't cause trouble to you anymore, because you don't have a Tao, because you are not worthy for me to kill, because, in the laws of the universe, those who do not have a Tao will have no future. I will watch you walk down the path of destruction. I will watch you become lost one day in the future, and I will watch you fall. His laughter echoed in the air, but Su Ming remained silent. What is Tao? Su Ming turned his head around and looked at the old sand spirit. I am an ancestral spirit. I do not practice Tao, but I know a thing or two about it. Tao is a code of conduct for you cultivators. It is the path you walk on. As for the other things, I cannot explain them clearly. But I know that only those who have a Tao can become masters of fate. Even I, as an ancestral spirit, have a path given to me by the universe. This is not fate, but a mark that cannot be described clearly and cannot be explained. If you continue walking down this mark and strengthen your Tao heart, then you will be able to break through all obstacles and reach the end, the old sand spirit said slowly after remaining silent for a moment. I weighed myself today, and I have lost 5 kilograms. Please vote for me as an encouragement. If you like this work, please come to Chidian. Come and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 1063. The chaos in Heaven Traversers lasted for nearly half a month before the swarm of beasts slowly dispersed. Without Heaven Traversers' progenitor around, Heaven Traversers would not be able to fight against this swarm of 1 million beasts. Any form of resistance would be instantly crushed, and the entire race could only migrate in the face of the beast's brutality. It was just like when Tian Xiezi was chased down by the 4 venerated races in the past. As they continued fleeing, they searched for a way to survive. However, there was also a difference. The migrating Heaven Traversers were caught between despair and hope. They were in despair over their current fate, and they hoped that their progenitor would appear. During that half a month, 4/10 of Heaven Traversers had died in the swarm of beasts. The deaths of tens of thousands of people turned into a thick stench of blood that filled the path in the galaxy where they migrated. This was an incredibly heavy blow to the entire Heaven Traversers. In fact, there was a high possibility that they would not be able to return to the galaxy that originally belonged to them, because while it was occupied by the swarm of beasts, it had also turned into their own territories. It was just like how one of Heaven Traversers' progenitors had snatched this galaxy from the beast swarm that originally occupied it countless years ago. Now, it had been snatched away by the beast swarm. Besides, they did not dare return to their original homeland, because the deaths of Heaven Traversers and many powerful warriors had caused the balance between Heaven Traversers and the other 3 venerated races to fall. The beast swarm that shook the inner parts of Divine Essence Star Ocean might not spread to the tribes in the periphery of the galaxy, but the other 3 venerated races in the inner parts of the galaxy would definitely learn of it after some time. These were 4 races that had worked together, but also had a grudge against each other for generations. That was why once the balance was lost, what awaited Heaven Traversers would be an even more tragic end. That was why their migration also meant that Heaven Traversers would disappear without a trace for a period of time. They would search for a remote place to cultivate and recuperate, and when they gathered together the power to rise to power once more, they would stage a comeback. As for their original home, while there were plenty of ferocious beasts in it and they had occupied it, the bald crane's abilities and obsession with crystals allowed it to sweep through the 100-something cultivation planets like a gust of wind during the past half a month. It took away all the crystals it could get its hands on in excitement. When it returned to Su Ming's side with the Abyss Dragon, it was still practically dancing with joy. It was so excited that its body was trembling nonstop. I'm rich. Darn it all, I'm rich. 3 crystals. There are actually 3 crystals in the entire Heaven Traversers. As the bald crane spoke excitedly, it cast a glance at Su Ming. The Abyss Dragon was originally very excited by the sight, but when it heard the bald crane's words, it was momentarily stunned. It clearly remembered that there should be tens of millions of crystals, but immediately after, it saw the bald crane casting a glance at it. Su Ming ignored the bald crane. He knew that it was worried that he would ask for crystals, which was why it had asked for 3. This amount would make anyone else speechless, and they would think that the bald crane's stinginess had already reached a state where it could make anyone's hair stand on end. However, Su Ming, who understood the bald crane, knew that it had struggled for a long period of time to say that it had 3 crystals, since the bald crane would be considered to have lost it if it did not pick up any crystals when it went out. It had already used up a lot of willpower before it could say that it had 3 crystals. Su Ming stared at Heaven Traverser's galaxy of the past with a calm expression on his face. He did not have a heart that bemoaned the state of the universe or took pity on others. There was only so much tenderness in his heart, and it was impossible for him to share it with all the living. Let's go. Su Ming stood up and cast a glance at the old sand spirit sitting on the ground. The old man also lifted his head to look at Su Ming. At the instant their gazes met, the old man's body disappeared and turned into nothingness. However, a voice that echoed in Su Ming's heart echoed in the air. You still have 2 more chances for me to attack. Do not forget our promise. My name is in the ballad. Su Ming nodded. He swung his arm, and the rune he had branded on his body since a long time ago was activated. Once it was activated, a layer of ripples spread out from under Su Ming's feet. They covered the bald crane and the Abyss Dragon, and in the blink of an eye, when the rune's light reached a piercing degree, Su Ming disappeared. Even the bald crane and the Abyss Dragon disappeared from the ball of sand. About 10 breaths had passed since Su Ming disappeared when violent, booming sounds came from within the sandball. As they reverberated in space, cracking sounds could also be heard. Cracks swiftly appeared on the sandball, and in the blink of an eye, they covered the surface of the sandball like a spider's web. A loud bang shot into the air, and the huge ball of sand was swiftly torn to pieces. Heaven Traverser's progenitor's figure appeared in the crumbling ball of sand. His expression was dark, and in his eyes was an extreme rage that he had been holding back for a long time. He stared at the galaxy where Heaven Traversers had once been and saw that there were now countless ferocious beasts there. He smelled the bloody stench of his people's deaths, and he fell silent. After a moment, Heaven Traverser's progenitor let out a long sigh. He did not search for Su Ming's traces, because he knew that he could not kill him. Instead, there was a high possibility that he would be trapped again. At that time, he believed that Su Ming would not be a soft-hearted person and would not be the kind of person who would feel guilty after killing too many people. Then, what awaited Heaven Traversers would truly be the destruction of their race. If anyone else had come to threaten him, he would not have believed them, and he would not have let the matter rest either. However, Su Ming had hunted down his master once in the past, and this person had already killed a third of his race 1,000 years later. This sort of person and this sort of cruelty caused Heaven Traverser's progenitor to absolutely not underestimate Su Ming's threat. Based on my guesses, the Sand Spirit should have made some sort of agreement with this person and will not attack too many times. But if he attacks again, then even if I can kill him in the future, all my people will die. It's just as he said. At that time, I'll be the only one left in Heaven Traversers. He is ruthless and merciless. If he can do something like exterminating our race, he can bear the price, but I cannot. Heaven Traverser's progenitor fell silent. With his level of cultivation and his status, he had practically never experienced the feeling of being threatened. At that moment, he felt incredibly complicated. After a long while, he sighed in his heart and walked in the direction where his people had migrated. He doesn't have a Tao heart. I'll wait for the day he rots. Heaven Traverser's progenitor left into the distance. In the inner part of Divine Essence Star Ocean was a quiet galaxy. There was a gigantic meteor floating in the galaxy. It was originally the nest of some ferocious beasts, but half a month ago, a woman had come to this place. With her power of lunar Culpa realm, she killed all the ferocious beasts and became the meteor's master. Once Su Hui laid out a rune according to Su Ming's requirements. She sat down cross-legged and quietly counted the time. This place was incredibly far away from Heaven Traversers. The rampage in the Sea of Beasts could not affect this place, which was why the galaxy looked calm. There was a gigantic void beast hidden in the space beyond the meteor. That beast looked like a crocodile, and it had its eyes closed and did not move. However, if it sensed any dangerous presence, it would immediately open its eyes. It was a ferocious beast that Su Hui had subdued with Su Ming's help while they were on their way to the inner part of Divine Essence Star Ocean. Su Hui had been waiting there for half a month, based on the promise Su Ming made with her. If he did not return after a month, then she was to stop waiting and immediately go back to gather with the 9 old frail darknesses. However, Su Hui had her own determination. If Su Ming did not return after a month, then she would not choose to go back. Instead, she would search for him. She stared at the relocation rune in front of her for half a month. On this day, light suddenly erupted from the relocation rune in her eyes. At the instant it appeared, Su Hui's eyes focused. She might have looked calm, but in her heart, she was slightly nervous. When she stood up, the light from the relocation rune was already piercing to the eyes. The void beast beside the meteor was also staring at it. When the light reached its strongest point, it instantly disappeared, and Su Ming appeared in the relocation rune. By his side were the bald crane and the abyss dragon, who had turned into 2 mutts. As for the Duke of Crimson Flame, he had already turned into a totem and was branded on Su Ming's arm. Su Hui looked at Su Ming, and a smile appeared on her face. Su Ming also saw Su Hui and walked to her side. Did everything go smoothly? Yes. That's good. Su Hui did not ask for the details. Instead, her gaze fell on the bald crane and the abyss dragon. She stared at the bald crane, and the bald crane stared back at her with an incredibly arrogant and provocative look. As for the abyss dragon, when it saw Su Hui, it was momentarily stunned, and a powerful wave of indignation instantly rose in its heart. It cursed Su Ming in its heart for always having beautiful women by his side, and it could not help but regard him with hostility. No matter what, it had to monitor all the members of the opposite sex around Su Ming for its young master. Su Hui chuckled softly in the face of the bald crane's provocative gaze. She was not bothered by it. Instead, she was slightly interested in the abyss dragon's hostile gaze. It's not yours, right? Su Hui was a mature and charming woman. Her calmness and wisdom were things that none of the women Su Ming had met possessed. Su Ming nodded. Let me guess. It's a girl's pet, and for some reason, it came to your side. As Su Hui spoke, a strange light shone in her eyes. When she looked at the abyss dragon, it immediately felt as if its changes had been seen through. It's an abyss dragon. I remember now. 1,000 years ago, I heard that the Emperor of Abyss True World sent an abyss dragon to the barren lands of Divine Essence to be exiled and imprisoned. Could it be you? Su Hui's calm gaze immediately caused the abyss dragon to instinctively take a few steps back. It had a strong feeling that the woman before it was its young master's great enemy. The abyss dragons have an incredibly unique status in the Emperor of Abyss True World. Unless they committed a grave crime, it would be impossible for them to be sent here. I remember that there was a rumor in the Emperor of Abyss True World that the 3rd prince of the Emperor of Abyss True World got married in the past. The bride was a woman from the strongest ancient family in the Emperor of Abyss True World, but she ran away. If she could escape from the Emperor of Abyss True World, she would need a world-traversing Abyss Dragon. 1,000 years ago, this woman was found and brought to the Emperor of Abyss True World. It was also at that time that you were sent here. Su Hui looked at the Abyss Dragon with a smile. Your master's name is Yu Xian, right? If you like this work, please come to Qidian. Come and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 1064. The Abyss Dragon nearly sucked in a sharp breath. It staggered a few steps backwards, and when it looked at Su Hui, it looked as if it had seen a ghost. The shock on its face represented the shock in its body and mind. The Abyss Dragon might not be very smart, but it knew that a person who could deduce so many things with just one glance was definitely not an ordinary person. Its mistress also had this ability, but compared to the woman before it, its mistress was a little immature. Looks like I guessed correctly. Yu Xian, the bride of the third prince's wedding in the Emperor of Abyss True World, is your mistress. Su Hui turned her head around with a smile and looked at Su Ming. So you're saying that Yu Xian is your lover? When she said these words, there was not a hint of abnormality on Su Hui's face. Her relaxed expression made Su Ming remember the conversation he had with her previously. When they had talked about changing her clothes, she had not shown a single hint of the embarrassment of a young girl, even though she knew that Su Ming had seen her entire body. That calmness was definitely not something a young girl would possess. Su Ming cast Su Hui a glance. He did not speak, but instead sat down cross-legged and closed his eyes to meditate. Only half a month had passed since his fight against Heaven Traverser's progenitor, and he still had injuries in his body. He had to recover as soon as possible. Besides, he had already broken the fusion between his 3 clones. His Akane clone had returned to the foreign land. If he trained there, he would be able to recover much faster. When Su Hui saw that Su Ming did not speak, she smiled and did not continue asking questions. Instead, she sat down beside him and protected him. In the blink of an eye, several days passed. In truth, the main reason why Su Ming chose to train in this place was because he was waiting for Heaven Traverser's progenitor to arrive. If Heaven Traverser's progenitor truly chose to compromise with his previous threats, then Su Ming would be able to carry out his future plans with peace of mind. 3 days was not a long time, but it was enough for Su Ming to judge the progenitor's actions. If Heaven Traverser's progenitor came, then without any hesitation, Su Ming would have the Sand Spirit trap him once again, and then he would personally lure the sea of ferocious beasts to destroy the entire Heaven Traversers. Even if Heaven Traverser's progenitor wanted to hide Heaven Traversers before he came to kill Su Ming, since Su Ming had already thought of this, then he would definitely not be unprepared. 3 days later, Su Ming opened his eyes. He lifted his right hand, and as he formed a seal, his eyes sparkled. After a moment, his expression returned to normal, but a freezing glare shone in his eyes. Su Hui, I will continue heading to the inner parts of Divine Essence Star Ocean. Will you come with me, or will you go back and meet up with the 9 old frail darknesses? Su Ming turned his head around and looked at Su Hui. Since I'm already here, I naturally can't go back alone. Su Hui smiled gracefully. Su Ming nodded. When he got up, he took a step forward and stood on the Void Beast's head. The Void Beast shuddered, and an obedient look appeared on its face. After all, over the years, Su Ming had been the one who fed it, and it had a rather good impression of him. It had long since forgotten about the torture it had suffered when it was subdued. As Su Hui took a step forward, she stood beside Su Ming. As for the bald crane and the Abyss Dragon, the two of them had occasionally discussed how to split the loot during the past 3 days. Right then, both of them were very satisfied, and they also ran to the Void Beast head. However, the Abyss Dragon stayed far away from Su Hui. Clearly, the trauma for what had happened just now was still lingering in its mind, and it did not dare provoke her. However, the bald crane had always been determined to become the Abyss Dragon's boss. When it saw how afraid its little brother was of Su Hui, the thought of standing up for her rose in its heart. However, when it showed this thought, it was mostly a provocation, as if only by doing this could it show off its status. However, it did manage to get the Abyss Dragon's zealous gaze in return. I saw 4 interesting cultivators just now. Su Ming stood on the Void Beast's head. When he said those words flatly, the Void Beast charged forward, and it was so quick that it instantly left the meteor. For cultivators? Su Hui blinked. For cultivators with secrets. They invited me to travel with them, and I agreed to it, but now they're going back on their word. They didn't keep the promise, Su Ming said calmly. Su Hui smiled, and her eyes narrowed until they looked like crescent moons. She could already imagine that the truth was definitely not as Su Ming had said. The 4 cultivators should have been forced to make this suggestion out of fear, and the invitation was just a temporary measure. Yes, as cultivators, we should honor our promises. How could the 4 of them do this? Su Hui said with a nod. That's right. They're going a little overboard, Su Ming said with a cold sneer, his expression as calm as ever. We have to teach them a lesson, Su Hui said in support of him. I intend to leave some seals on their bodies, Su Ming said. That's not good. Why don't we leave some marks on their bodies? I once saw an art that can turn a man into a woman. This art is very useful, and I've had people practice it many times before. Or we can have their nascent divinities swap with their bodies, similar to possession. This punishment will definitely be remembered for the rest of their lives, Su Hui suggested after thinking about it. Her conversation with Su Ming fell into the bald crane's ears, which had a provocative look in its eyes. It also reached the Abyss Dragon's ears, and the two immediately shuddered. It was especially so for the bald crane. It quickly put away its provocative look and put on an obsequious expression. It suddenly realized that this woman called Su Hui was actually quite malicious. It stared at the woman and Su Ming's backs and listened to their discussion. Suddenly, it felt that these 2 people were a perfect match. After pondering over it for a moment, to not provoke the woman and to draw a clear line between it and the Abyss Dragon, it immediately changed its body. It no longer looked like a mutt, but returned to its original appearance. The Abyss Dragon took a few more steps back. In the depths of its heart, it had already elevated Su Hui to a level that it absolutely could not afford to provoke. The meaning behind her words made it feel a chill run down its spine when heard them. It could already imagine that if the 4 cultivators were truly tortured like this, it would be the most terrifying nightmare of their lives. This isn't too good, right? Su Ming hesitated for a moment. What's wrong with it? It's fine, it's fine. Just watch me. I used to do this a lot. Ahem. As Su Hui spoke, excitement appeared on her face, as if she was incredibly passionate about this matter. This is... Su Ming turned his head around to look at Su Hui. Forget the bald crane. Even he thought that this suggestion was a little too cruel. Don't hesitate anymore. Just watch me when the time comes. I'm good at this sort of thing. Don't worry. I'll definitely let them remember this lesson. I'll let them know that as cultivators, they have to keep their promises. Su Hui licked her lips, and the excitement on her face made her look incredibly alluring. However, her words made Su Ming smile wryly. All right. Su Ming shook his head. He could sense the brand he had left on the 4 people's bodies in the past, and the void beast beneath him charged forward. At that moment, Xin Shang, Yin Yu, Yin Yu, Yin Yu, Yin Yu, and Yin Yu were charging forward in a galaxy that was a distance away from Su Ming and his group. They were all incredibly fast, and they turned into 4 long arcs. Wherever they went, not a single ripple would be stirred up in the galaxy. It's already been half a month. Are we really not going to wait for that person if we leave just like this? The man called Yin Yu asked hesitantly in a low voice. That person is filled with evil. With him around, we might not be able to get anything this time, but I think that since he dared to let us go, then he definitely has a way to find us. It's fine. In another 3 days, we'll be able to step into a relocation vortex. At that time, we'll be far away from this place. Even if he has some sort of divine ability that can find us, and even if he left a brand on us, as long as there's enough distance between us, he won't be able to find us since he doesn't know the relocation vortex in this place. That's the only thing we can do. But it's impossible for that person to not be injured after fighting against Heaven Traversers. He might still be healing himself and won't have the time to bother about us. That's right. Don't worry. Even if he catches up to us, it's fine. He never told us where to wait. He just said that he'll find us on his own. If that's the case, it's not our fault. As the four of them charged forward, they sent messages to each other. Even though they still felt slightly uneasy in their hearts, they became even faster and charged towards the relocation vortex that was formed 3 days ago. Time trickled by. When the third day arrived, the four cultivators' eyes sparkled. Based on the map they obtained, once they walked past the relocation vortex, they would enter the core region of the inner part of Divine Essence Star Ocean. That place was already not too far away from Dustburners. We're here. It's right in front of us. That fiendish person still hasn't arrived, but it's not like we don't want to wait for him. The man called Hua Yu smiled. The other three also let out sighs of relief in their hearts. They might have sounded relaxed, but in truth, during the past half a month, they had been incredibly nervous. After all, the mighty pressure Su Ming had brought to them in the past had shocked them greatly. After a moment, the four of them stopped in the galaxy. Once the cultivator called Xianshang looked around him, he lifted his right hand and swung his arm. Immediately, a layer of dust scattered down. Not too far away, there was a very fine spot where some of the dust had been devoured. That spot was only the size of a fingernail. If they did not look closely, it would be difficult for them to see it in the vast galaxy. This is the place. Excitement shone in Xianshang's eyes. Just as he was about to take a step into the vortex, a voice that caused all four of them to stiffen suddenly reverberated in the galaxy. The four of you are moving so quickly. Could it be that you've forgotten the promise you made to me? When that voice spread out, ripples spread out in the galaxy. In the span of a breath, the four people saw a void beast that was tens of thousands of feet in size that looked like a crocodile appear in space. He also saw Su Ming looking at him coldly from the top of the void beast's head, as well as an incredibly beautiful woman who was smiling with a hint of excitement behind him, and the abyss dragon in the form of Mutt, as well as the bald crane. At the instant they saw the bald crane, their expressions changed drastically. It was as if Su Ming was no longer important in their hearts, and their attention was completely attracted to the bald crane. They could tell with just one glance that the bald crane was the ferocious beast they had seen in the galaxy previously, the one that had been chased by a swarm of 1 million beasts. They're in cahoots. This was the only sentence that appeared in the four people's minds. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian. Come and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 1065. The galaxy fell silent at that instant. Su Ming stared at the four cultivators, and the four cultivators stared back at them. None of them spoke. After some time, Su Hui's dry cough broke the silence in the area, and it also allowed the four cultivators to recover from their shock. They were not shocked by Su Ming's arrival. After all, this was within their expectations. In fact, they were already mentally prepared for it. What shocked them was the bald crane. The ferocious beast that they had worshipped slightly and dreamed of subduing when they became strong in the future already had a master. They did not know the bald crane's exact level of cultivation. Even if they looked at it with their eyes and sensed it with their minds, they could not tell that it was very strong. However, there was the concept of concealment and sealing in the world, and they believed that the crane that had lured 1 million beasts into a frenzy was definitely not an ordinary person. At that moment, as their hearts trembled and Su Hui's dry coughs reverberated in the air, the four cultivators instinctively retreated. The cultivator called Xianshang only took 3 steps back before he forced himself to stop. He knew that he could not escape, and he could not even summon the thought to attack. Even if the four of them had their own trump cards, Su Ming alone was enough to make them break down, much less the bald crane. In fact, the grinning expression of the woman beside Su Ming gave him goosebumps. Xianshang was not the only one who was smart among the four cultivators. The person called Huayu also snapped out of his daze after retreating 100-something feet. When he saw that Su Ming and the others were not chasing after him, he stopped moving in his anxiety and wrapped his fist in his palm to bow to them. As for Yunyu and Nianin, they were clearly a little slower in their reactions. By then, they had already fled 1,000 feet away. Just as they were about to charge forward with their blood escape, ripples suddenly shone in the space before them, and Su Hui walked out. She still had a grin on her face, but there was a murderous look in her eyes. She was slightly angry. After all, the four of them had fled after she let out a dry cough. "Why are you leaving when you see me?" At the same time, Su Hui took a step forward. She lifted her right hand and swung it forward. With it, the shadow of a moon appeared in front of her. When it appeared, Yin Yu and Yin Yin's expressions instantly changed. Lunar, Culpa Realm. The two of them immediately scattered and went in two different directions. The cultivator named Yin Yu noticed that two of his companions had given up on escaping, so he stopped with a wry smile. Only Nian Yin continued to move at full speed. He even coughed out blood to form the blood escape, and his speed suddenly increased. However, before he could escape more than 10,000 feet, he was pulled out of the blood shadow and coughed out blood once more. Strangely, there was nothing strange about his body, but his body was pushed back as if he had hit an invisible barrier and was bounced back. As he flew backwards, his hair seemed to be grabbed by an invisible hand and pulled back rapidly. When they arrived in front of the void beast where Su Ming was, the cultivator called Nian Yin was flung to the ground. Most of his hair was torn off, and blood flowed down his cheeks. His expression was filled with shock and disbelief as he stared at Su Hui, who had walked out of the space beside him. "Run! Why aren't you running anymore?" She lifted her right hand and pointed at Nian Yin's body through the air. As she did so, a red and white aura surrounded her. At the instant it touched Nian Yin's body, the red aura fused into his chest, while the white aura dissipated into his throat and lower body. As the expressions of the other three cultivators changed drastically, and they cried out in shock, they immediately saw the cultivator called Nian Yin's originally flat chest swell up. His Adam's apple shrank before their eyes until it disappeared. His rough skin became fair in the blink of an eye, and his index fingers became smooth and soft. All of these changes in his body showed that the yin and yang in this person's body had been reversed, and he had turned into a woman. Nian Yin was momentarily stunned before he let out a shrill scream of pain. Even his scream had a shrill quality to it, and it was no longer as sonorous as a man's. Instead, it had turned into the feminine voice of a woman. It was especially so for his buttocks. They had clearly grown larger, and even the lines of his body had started bending. All of this brought indescribable shock and terror to the remaining three cultivators. Even Su Ming's eyelids twitched when he saw this. His heart raced a few times, and when he looked at Su Hui, a hint of wariness appeared in his eyes. The bald crane also widened its eyes. This scene caused its body to shudder. The abyss dragon by its side also instinctively moved back. Its gaze when it looked at Su Hui was filled with fear. "I can be killed, but not humiliated." Nian Yin's expression was bitter. He knew all the changes in his body the best. At that moment, the complicated feelings in his heart could no longer be described with words. There was also a wave of grief and indignation in his heart, and he roared at Su Hui. Su Ming frowned as well. He could kill a person without hesitation, but humiliating them like this was something he could not do. Just as he was about to speak, the cultivator whose body features had been changed roared again. "I have no enmity with you. We just ran into each other by chance, and you're already doing this? Aren't you afraid of heaven's wrath and retribution? Come on, if you want to kill me, then kill me." Su Hui chuckled softly. "You seem to have a point. When my husband first met you, he didn't touch any of you. It's normal for you to want to escape with your secrets, but if you can't escape, then it means that you aren't strong enough and were caught. My husband doesn't intend to punish you too much. He just wants to ask you a few questions. If you're straightforward, then that's fine. With my understanding of him, you can split the spoils equally." Besides, with your levels of cultivation, it's not enough for you to dig out any secrets in Divine Essence Star Ocean. If my husband joins you, your chances of success will increase by several fold. What's so bad about that? But I just let out a fake cough, and you ran. You can't escape, right? Why are you acting so indignant here? Su Hui said with a smile. Xian Shang and the other two fell silent. A contemplative look appeared on their faces. To them, Su Hui's words did not sound domineering, and the truth was indeed as she said. The three of them could not help but sink into contemplation. However, Nian Yin, whose physical features had been changed, was feeling incredibly confused at that moment. He could not hear her at all. He let out a cold harumph, but almost at the moment he did so, Su Hui's next sentence immediately caused his expression to change drastically. The art you practice should be the great wheel of time art. I noticed this just now. By the looks of it, your surname is Nian, and you come from True Morning Tao World. Let me think. The Nianhua tribe in True Morning Tao World was created by a sect that had split from the immortals in the past. 3,000-something years ago, there was a tribe member who killed his own kind. Once he was captured, his power was destroyed, and he was sent to the barren lands of divine essence as punishment. That person was you, right? But you still have your power. Looks like the Nianhua tribe is behind your operation this time. Who are you? When Nian Yin's expression changed, the pupils of Xian Shang and the other two cultivators shrank, and they looked towards Su Hui. Me? My name is Su Hui, and I come from Phoenix Sect. Su Hui smiled faintly and looked at Su Ming, who was frowning, making it clear that he was slightly displeased. Phoenix Sect. Su Hui, you're the sacred lady of Phoenix Sect. Nian Yin was momentarily stunned. His arrogance instantly crumbled, and he became dispirited. In anguish, he gave up on all forms of resistance. In fact, based on the change in his expression, it was clear that he was filled with terror and dread towards Phoenix Sect. That's right, I am Phoenix Sect, which is secretly known as Yin Sect by all the cultivators in True Morning Tao World, and I am also one of the two women you call the Scorpion Woman Su Hui, Su Hui said with a grin. This was the first time Su Ming learned of this, and when he heard it, he was momentarily stunned. These things did not exist even in Dao Kong's memories. Perhaps this was related to Dao Kong's status and experiences. In fact, Su Ming had always been slightly puzzled as to why Dao Kong had so few memories. After all, the more memories a living being had, the more difficult it was for them to possess them, and Dao Kong's memories were just the basics. Scorpion Woman Su Hui was a metaphor the cultivators of True Morning Tao World used to refer to the two sacred ladies of Phoenix Sect. Based on this metaphor, it could be seen that there was a reason why Phoenix Sect was known as Yin Sect in private. Su Ming fell silent. He suddenly understood why Su Hui did things without any qualms. The fact that she had such a great reputation in the outside world was definitely related to her actions in True Morning Tao World. Scorpions were poisonous, but the poison was not in their mouths or claws, but in their tails. They were very fast and small, which meant that they would not attract too much attention. However, during critical moments, if anyone was careless, they would be poisoned to death. This was the terrifying aspect of scorpions. As for snakes, they were skilled in hiding and waiting. Usually, they hid their poisonous fangs in their mouths and would not easily reveal them. However, when they did, they would be filled with killing intent. This metaphor connected Su Ming's bitter first love to another woman in his memories. He had known since a long time ago that there were two sacred ladies of Phoenix Sect. One of them was Su Hui, and the other was the Snake Woman by Ling. This was something that existed in Dao Kong's memories. In fact, Su Ming also knew that there was a high possibility that Su Hui had known his name a long time ago. It did not matter whether Bai Ling had told him personally or whether she had investigated him in secret, but it was clear that there was a high possibility that she knew about him. That was why Su Hui had been able to say that he was thinking about a woman when he was in Ninth Tribes Mountain. It was also because of this sentence that he had entered a dream that no cultivator could dream about, but had appeared in it. It was also at that time that Su Ming learned that he was fixated on the promise and not by Ling. He had also broken the knot in his heart and moved past the change of heart. Su Ming would not believe that all of this was a coincidence, but no matter what, he could tell that Su Hui's actions were mostly out of kindness, which was why Su Ming had never pointed it out. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Qidian. Come and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 1066. Everyone had their own secrets, and there was no need to forcefully obtain them. Even if it was the 4 cultivators' secrets, if they insisted on not telling them, Su Ming would not force them. In truth, what he valued the most was the fact that the 4 of them had gone to dust burners, and he also wanted to go to dust burners. Whether a person was truly mature was not shown by their age, and neither was it shown by the wrinkles of time. Instead, it was whether their hearts knew how to tolerate others. There were some things that did not need to be explained. As long as they could tolerate others, then everything would be fine. In the past, Su Ming would not tolerate others, but after going through so many things, he had already learned how to tolerate others in certain aspects. If they did not tell him, then he would not ask. In truth, the difference between knowing things in one's heart and being eloquent was a difference between maturity and immaturity. All right, Su Hui, help him recover, Su Ming said faintly while sitting on the void beast. Su Hui turned her head around and cast Su Ming a glance. A smile appeared on her face. How could she not know what Su Ming knew? There was only happiness when they interacted with each other like this. There were no schemes, no other thoughts, and it was one of the few times in her life where she could be like this. That was why Su Hui wanted to treasure it. She did not want to lose the taste of their interaction once they told each other the truth. It was rare for her to be muddle-headed. She nodded obediently, then lifted her right hand and swung it at Nian. Purple and blue smoke swiftly landed on his body, causing his Adam's apple to form, his bulging chest to become flat, his buttocks to shrink, and his skin to return to rough. Once she was done, Su Hui returned to Su Ming's side. If the 4 of you want to tell me your secrets, then you can tell me. If you don't want to, I won't make things difficult for you. But I want to know how to go to dust burners. I've observed the route you took. You should have a map. Tell me the route, and I will immediately leave, Su Ming said calmly. The markings regarding dust burners on the map Digio and Mo Sha had given him were very vague. After all, they were not like heaven traversers who were located outside. Dust burners were located near the core of the galaxy, and Ninth Tribe had never gone there in the past. That was why he only had a general idea of where dust burners were. If he searched for them blindly in Divine Essence Star Ocean, it would be incredibly difficult, and it would be even more dangerous. Once Nian recovered, his face was pale. He immediately returned to Xianshang, Huayu, and Huayu's side. He did not dare look at Su Hui. Perhaps the other True Worlds did not know much about this woman's reputation, but as a person from True Morning Dao World, he knew clearly that in True Morning Dao World, this woman could be said to be someone whose name would cause others' expressions to change. She killed people like flies, and her heart was so malicious that it could make others' hearts tremble. However, at the same time he was wary of Su Hui, he was even more shocked by Su Ming. After all, Su Hui, who was known as the Scorpion Woman, was cold and merciless. Even the Snake Woman, who was from the same sect as her, had fought against each other both openly and covertly. Besides their masters, no one had ever heard of anyone who could make them so obedient. With just one sentence from Su Ming, Su Hui had actually managed to turn him back. If word of this got out, perhaps no one would believe it. When Nian lowered his head, Xianshang, Huayu, and Huayu cast each other a glance. After a moment of silence, Xianshang patted his storage bag and brought out a jade slip. Once he branded it with the deity of the abyss, he threw it at Su Ming. This is the map to dust burners. Senior, the spot beside you is a relocation vortex. Once you walk out from the other end, you will find detailed markings on the map. Su Ming took the jade slip. Once he scanned it with his Atman, he cast a scrutinizing look at the 4 people. Then, the void beast beneath him slowly turned around and floated towards the relocation vortex. When they were beside the relocation vortex, the void beast came to a halt, and Su Ming spoke softly. "You can enter first." Xianshang nodded. He could guess that Su Ming would definitely not believe him so easily. After all, if he were in his place, he would do the same. He did not feel conflicted, since he did not do anything to the map. At that moment, he cast a glance at the three people beside him at ease. Once they looked at each other, they chose to obey. The four of them turned into four long arcs and charged towards the relocation vortex. Once they closed in, they did not hesitate. Xianshang was the first to step in, followed by Nian and the other two. Once they disappeared, the void beast beneath Su Ming looked as if it sucked in a deep breath. Its body swiftly shrank, and when it was only several hundreds of feet tall, it crawled into the relocation vortex. Its body instantly fused into it and disappeared. Within the vortex was a gigantic, semi-transparent tunnel in the colorful world. Xianshang and his group had their eyes closed and simply allowed their bodies to slide forward. Behind them was the void beast, which was several hundreds of feet tall. On its back was Su Hui. She had her eyes open and was looking around her. As for the bald crane, with its personality, it would naturally not close its eyes. Instead, it opened them wide and looked around. The abyss dragon did not know what it meant to close its eyes either, so it kept its eyes open. Su Ming had never had the habit of closing his eyes in this place. At the instant he entered the world in the vortex, he immediately saw the familiar ripples of power in the depths of the darkness in the distance. The corners of Su Ming's lips curled up slightly. It was the presence of the twin dragon Black Horse. That Black Horse had clearly remembered Su Ming. This time, right when Su Ming arrived, it immediately charged towards him at full speed from the distance. "It's here again." Su Hui's voice was calm, but a hint of anxiety flashed briefly in her eyes. She remembered clearly that the last time Su Ming had been caught up to by that Black Horse, he had nearly been unable to leave the world in the vortex. Who's here?" The bald crane widened its eyes and continued looking around, but as it searched, a roar that brought with it a powerful ripple of power swiftly roared in the world in the vortex. That roar intimidated all the people's hearts, causing the tunnel to tremble, and the colorful jellyfish-like life forms in the area to swiftly retreat. It also caused the expressions of Xianshang and the other three to change, but they kept their eyes shut and did not open them. Su Ming focused his gaze and looked over, and a smile appeared at the corners of his lips. The more he looked at the Black Horse, the more he liked it, and the desire to subdue it became stronger. If it was not because the Black Horse possessed power equivalent to a master of fate, Su Ming would have attacked a long time ago. "Sooner or later, you will belong to me." Su Ming stood up. He could sense the void beast beneath him trembling viciously as the Black Horse roared in the distance. It was sending out a great wave of fear. Clearly, the shock contained in the roar was even greater to the ferocious beast. "It's best if you don't provoke it." Last time Sui could not help but worry appear on her face. This was not fake, but a true expression of her heart. "You don't have to bother with it." Resolve appeared in Su Ming's eyes as he stared at the darkness in the distance. He could vaguely see a long arc charging towards him at an indescribable speed. The 6 dim lights in the long arc were the horse's 6 eyes. The arrogance in those eyes was the source of Su Ming's resolve. This time, the horse was clearly much further away from Su Ming, which was why, based on Su Ming's experience, even if they left, it would still be difficult for the horse to show itself. After all, the distance between them was simply too great. And Su Ming wanted to see the horse, and he also wanted the Black Horse to see him. He wanted to make this prideful dark horse remember his provocation. He wanted to make it so that when he stepped into the vortex at any moment, this horse would immediately arrive. If he wanted to do this, then he would need the dark horse to have an incredibly deep impression of Su Ming, and to this prideful existence, provocation was an obsession that it would never be able to ignore. Su Ming walked out of the void beast and threw his head back to let out a long roar. That roar shook the entire world in the vortex, and as it reverberated in the air, it stirred up an endless amount of echoes. This scene immediately caused the expressions of the four cultivators to change. They could not help but start cursing in their hearts. This was the world in the vortex, a place where they could not open their eyes, much less make a single sound, or else they would run into great danger. This was something they had understood in great detail when they learned about the relocation vortex a long time ago. Yet at that moment, Su Ming's long roar completely shattered the silence in the world in the vortex. Su Ming's long roar was filled with great provocation. It pierced through the endless void and landed in the black horse's ears, causing endless anger to appear in its eyes. It responded to Su Ming by letting out a roar and suddenly increasing its speed by nearly 100 times. Su Ming smiled. This was the black horse's true speed. Time trickled by. When Su Ming and his group were about to reach the exit of the relocation vortex, a long arc appeared at the end of Su Ming's vision at an indescribable speed. Along with the long arc was a sea of fire that surged into the sky, as well as a black horse with 2 dragon heads in it. The horse was several thousands of feet tall, and its hooves were covered in flames. Black smoke came out of its nostrils. A fierce glare shone in its eyes, and it lifted its head to let out a third roar. With one move, it charged towards Su Ming while stepping on flames. From the distance, it looked as if the world in the vortex was burning. As the flames roared, they swept in all directions. You. When the black horse's body was completely revealed, the bald crane shuddered. It flapped its wings and widened its eyes in disbelief. It pointed at the black horse and stuttered for a long time. You, darn it all. That's a resentful way. There's still a resentful way in this world. 2 dragon heads. This means that it's still a cub. Damn it, how is this possible? The bald crane shuddered and screamed shrilly, speaking of the fragments of memories that had appeared in its head at the instant it saw the black horse. What's a resentful way? Su Ming stared at the black horse and immediately asked. He knew that the bald crane's origins were mysterious and that its memories were fragmented. It would only occasionally remember some of them. Beyond the 4 great true worlds is the 5th true world. There are 3 other great ancient kingdoms in the endless galaxy. One of them is Wei. There were countless cultivators in that ancient kingdom, but in one night, all of them died. Once the entire ancient kingdom was reduced to ashes, all the cultivators' souls gathered together to turn into resentment. This resentment lay dormant in the galaxy for several eons before it turned into resentful Wei. Su Ming's pupils shrank. To be continued. If you like this work, please come Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 1067. The universe will not tolerate the resentful Weiss, because the destruction of ancient Wei is the will of heaven. However, Wei's soul will not be extinguished. It will gather its resentment, and it will become the enemy of the galaxy, which is why it will be destroyed. Those who kill the resentful Weiss will obtain the kismet of the galaxy, and everything will go smoothly, which is why the other 2 great ancient nations surrounded them and attacked them in the past. This caused the race to be completely destroyed, and not a single resentful Weiss remained. There's actually a resentful Wei here. Kill it. If you can kill it, then even if so many years have passed, you will still be able to obtain the kismet of the galaxy. It's especially so in the era after the Great Destruction. Those who can obtain the kismet of the galaxy are incredibly rare. Su Ming, your cultivation-based clone was born because it was tainted with kismet. Because of that, if you kill this creature, you will obtain even more kismet. This kismet might be vague, but it will be enough for you to fulfill all your wishes for 10,000 years. The bald crane's expression was solemn, which had never been seen before. Its words no longer contained the perverted air that had always existed in the past. Instead, there was a dignified presence in its words. However, that presence was swiftly disappearing. The bald crane shuddered, and a dazed look appeared in its eyes. It was as if the one who had spoken at that moment was not itself. What is the relationship between the 3 great ancient nations and the 5 great true worlds. Su Ming immediately asked, "The 9 great true worlds are the lands of the lower realms, and the 3 great ancient nations are the skies of the upper realms. When they are together, they form the 180 expanse cosmoses of Dark Dawn, and one more expanse cosmos beyond St. Defire's 180 expanse cosmoses. Arid Triad Expanse Cosmos. St. Defire has 1 less expanse cosmos, and Dark Dawn has 1 more expanse cosmos. Whoever reaches the 180 expanse cosmoses first can wage war." When the bald crane said those words, its head tilted to the side, and it immediately fainted. The abyss dragon caught it. Su Ming's heart trembled. By his side, Su Hui's expression also changed swiftly. Clearly, the bald crane's words were a secret they had never heard of before. Those words might seem incredibly normal, but there was a profound meaning hidden within them. If anyone pondered over them carefully, they would definitely feel as if a storm had raged in their minds. Dark Dawn's 180 expanse cosmoses and St. Defire's 180 expanse cosmoses were the equivalent of Su Ming's knowledge expanding endlessly in an instant, allowing him to instantly understand just how big and vast the galaxy was. It did not matter whether it was true morning Tao world or Sacredine world. Even if the Emperor of Abyss True World, the mysterious 4th True World, the vanished 5th True World, and the other 4 great true worlds that had disappeared during the Great Destruction were added, these were not the complete Arid Triad Expanse Cosmos. The 3 great ancient kingdoms would still need to be added to form the complete Arid Triad Expanse Cosmos. And the complete Arid Triad Expanse Cosmos had 360 other expanse cosmoses of the same size in the galaxy. The galaxy was boundless in terms of individual strength. Even if it was a master of fate, lives, and death, how could he rank amongst the 361 great worlds? Su Ming and Su Hui were not the only ones who were shocked into silence by the bald crane's words. Xian Shang, Yin Yu, and Yin Yu also felt an unprecedented shock in their hearts. Unable to control themselves, they opened their eyes and turned their heads around to look at the bald crane. They had also heard the bald crane's words. At that moment, as their expressions changed, it was clear that they found it difficult to accept this truth. They had thought that the 4 great true worlds were the edge of the universe, and to their surprise, the 5th true world was just a legend. Yet at that moment, their beliefs were completely shattered. So aside from the 5 great true worlds, there were 4 great true worlds, and beyond the 9 great true worlds, there were 3 great ancient kingdoms. Only when the 3 great ancient kingdoms and the 9 great true worlds fused together would they form the complete Arid Triad Expanse Cosmos. So, beyond Arid Triad Expanse Cosmos were the 180 expanse cosmoses of Dark Dawn and the 180 expanse cosmoses of St. Defire. There was a total of 360 expanse cosmoses. The first thought that appeared in the hearts of the 4 was disbelief, but Su Ming and Su Hui's expressions, as well as the ancient air and the bald crane's words, made their instincts as cultivators tell them that there was an 8/10 of a possibility that all of this was real, even if they did not have any proof to prove the truth. In silence, the resentful Wei Black Horse let out a 4th roar. As it reverberated in the air, the black horse with the 2 dragon heads that was several thousands of feet long appeared before everyone's eyes, and it was swiftly closing in on them. The arrogance in its 6 eyes and the air that allowed no provocation was incredibly strong. Su Ming stared at the black horse that was getting closer to him quietly. As he stared at it, the bald crane's words echoed in his head, and he suddenly felt that he was similar to the black horse to a certain extent. It was clearly a creature that had been sent away by its people when it was still a newborn during the destruction of its race. It became the only existence left in its race, and Su Ming was the same. Its people had worked together to kill it, and it was the same for the Abyss Builders. He and the Black Horse had grown up in a place that did not belong to them, and they had lived there until this day. Su Ming's silence and his thoughts were revealed in his eyes. At the instant they landed in the Black Horse's eyes, it came to a halt, but soon it lifted its head high. At the same time, a look of disdain appeared on its face. It also put on an expression that said it did not need pity. It stared at Su Ming coldly, then rushed forward at an even faster speed. However, as the saying went, a mountain that looks far away will run a horse to death. In a world in the vortex, the distance that might not seem far was, in truth, incredibly large. The black horse's speed might be incomparable, but since it had been too far away, it could not catch up to Su Ming and the others in a dozen-something breaths. Besides, Su Ming could vaguely sense that there seemed to be a certain limit to speed in the world in the vortex. He could not shift in this place. He could see that the black horse seemed to be continuously crashing into walls around it. This was clearly the key to limiting its speed. Each time it moved forward, it would seem as if it was crashing into one wall after another. In silence, Su Ming did not provoke the black horse this time. Instead, as Xian Shang and the other three disappeared, Su Hui, and the void beast beneath them also disappeared from the world in the vortex. A roar filled with sorrow that no one else could hear, but Su Ming could feel came from the black horse's mouth, and it lingered for a long time without disappearing. The galaxy near the core of the inner part of Divine Essence Star Ocean looked like a clear pool of water. There was not a single speck of dust in it, causing all those who saw it to be unable to help themselves, but be immersed in this beauty that they could not find anywhere else. This place was incredibly far away from heaven traversers. If they flew, then with Su Ming's speed, he would need to last for more than a year without stopping. At that moment, as the group appeared, Su Ming stared at the entrance to the relocation vortex quietly. The bald crane's words still echoed in his head, refusing to disappear. Su Hui was also a little absent-minded. She was constantly immersed in her own thoughts. We're out? Darn it all. Why did I fall asleep? The bald crane opened its eyes at that moment. There was great fatigue on its face. It hopped a few times and began mumbling under its breath in great puzzlement. However, after a few mumbles, it immediately saw the abyss dragon looking at it with a slightly complicated gaze. The bald crane also saw Su Hui, the four cultivators, and even Su Ming. What's wrong? Why are all of you staring at me? The bald crane felt its skin crawl when it was stared at. It was incredibly nervous, and wariness appeared on its face. It took a few steps back and pressed its claws firmly on its butt. I don't have any crystals. I don't have any crystals. The bald crane shouted loudly. It noticed that Su Ming was not the only one looking at it. Even the four cultivators were occasionally looking at it cautiously with strange gazes. Su Ming cast a scrutinizing glance at the bald crane before averting his gaze. He sat down cross-legged on the void beast and patted it. Immediately, the void beast moved, turned around, and floated into the distance. When they reached this place, it was time for them to part ways with the four cultivators. Su Ming might have been numb to killing in his life and seemed to be incredibly bloodthirsty. But in truth, if no one provoked him directly or indirectly, he would not attack easily. There was no grudge between him and the four cultivators. So Su Ming did not want to kill them. As the void beast left into the distance, layers of ripples gradually appeared in the galaxy. Su Hui hesitated for a moment, but once she cast a glance at Su Ming, she did not say anything. Instead, she sat down beside him. As for the bald crane, it was currently holding the abyss dragon and asking something in a low voice. There was no need for anyone to listen to it to know that it was definitely asking about why the group had been looking at it so strangely just now. When the four cultivators came out, they were immediately on guard. Some of their gazes might have been attracted by the bald crane's awakening, and their minds had been intimidated by its words just then, but this was a matter of life and death, and they did not have the time to think about anything else. Most of their attention was placed on being on guard. They did not know whether Su Ming would keep to his promise, but when they saw Su Ming and his group leaving into the distance, the four of them immediately let out a sigh of relief in their hearts. At the same time, they cast each other a glance, and all of them saw the hesitation in each other's eyes. Su Hui's previous words had struck a chord in their hearts. With just the four of them, they did not have much confidence that they could succeed in this operation. In truth, they had to rely on luck. However, if Su Ming and Su Hui joined them, then their chances of success would become much greater. This was a choice. One side would not suffer any losses, but the possibility of success would not be great. The other side would suffer losses, but their chances of success would be higher. When they saw that Su Ming and the others had already left into the distance, the four people cast each other a glance before they looked toward Xianshang. After all, he was the leader of this operation. It would be best for him to make the decision. Xianshang's expression changed several times. If Su Ming had forcefully asked him about it just now, then even if he told him the truth, he would definitely search for a chance to counterattack later on in their journey. But Su Ming did not force him. This made Xianshang hesitate, and he quickly weighed his gains and losses. Then, he gritted his teeth and took a few steps forward before wrapping his fist in his palm towards Su Ming, who was leaving into the distance. "Senior, please hold on. I am willing to tell you the secret. If we work together, we will definitely succeed." "Not interested." Su Ming's faint voice came from the back of the void beast sitting cross-legged in the galaxy. The void beast beneath him did not stop. It went further into the distance. "This is related to the activation of the fifth kiln," Xianshang immediately said. "To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation." Chapter 1068. If there were a few things that were the most important to Su Ming in Divine Essence Star Ocean, then all of them pointed towards the fifth true world, and if he wanted to go there, he needed the fifth stone. However, the fifth stone was incredibly rare. No one knew just who had it. The only thing they knew was that the fifth stone was produced in the fifth kiln. However, there was no pattern to the activation of the fifth kiln. Sometimes it would be every few decades, sometimes it would be every few hundred years, and sometimes it would be thousands of years. In fact, the longest interval between its activation was 20,000-something years. The fifth kiln was one of the most mysterious places in Divine Essence Star Ocean. Besides those who had entered it, no one else knew what was in it. Even if there were people who returned alive, they would naturally not tell anyone else about it. Most of them turned into the greatest secrets of their race so that it would be convenient for those who could head to the fifth kiln again in the future. The location of the fifth kiln had always been a secret. Unless they searched for the flames that filled the entire Divine Essence Star Ocean when it was activated, then they could only look to the east of the cultivation planet to see the strange sun, and that sun was the fifth kiln. However, if they searched for it, then even if they reached the end of the path, they would still be unable to find it. All of this was like an illusion. They could see it, but when they stretched their hands in it, they would only see ripples. They could not bring it out. Su Ming was not putting on an act when Xianshang invited him to join them. He was truly not too interested in it. There were countless ruins in Divine Essence Star Ocean, as well as countless places where the gods lay dormant. It could be said that there was a possibility that all of them contained serendipities and treasures that people would fight over. He could do this alone. He would not go with anyone else. Besides, Su Ming's focus was not on those serendipities, but on taking revenge on the remaining 3 venerated races according to his plan. At the same time, he would wait for the activation of the fifth kiln. It would be best if he could wait until it appeared, but if he could not, he could only return to true Morning Dao world with regrets. However, at the instant Xianshang's second sentence fell into Su Ming's ears, he opened his eyes. He lifted his right hand and struck the void beast. It instantly stopped in the galaxy. When he saw the void beast stop, Xianshang knew that the fifth kiln had played a decisive role. Su Ming stood up from the void beast. When he turned his head around, he looked at Xianshang and his group in the distance. He lifted his foot and took a step forward. At the instant his foot landed, he shot through space and appeared in front of Xianshang. "Continue," Su Ming said flatly. Xianshang was silent for a moment before he said resolutely, "I am a true guard from true, sacredine world in the barren lands of divine essence. It should be said that our Xian clan has had clansmen who have been here as true guards for generations. The story begins more than 10,000 years ago. At that time, My ancestor obtained a medallion by chance. This is a miraculous title plate. There is an inextinguishable flame on it. Our Xian clan's successive generations of clansmen have studied this title plate and discovered that the flame on it is no ordinary flame. However, we are still unable to determine exactly what this flame is. Senior, you saw its color just now. This flame has not been extinguished for nearly 10,000 years. It is stored in the medallion, and we don't know how it appeared or how it was created. But no matter where it is, as long as we shake the medallion, the flame will immediately appear, and it can burn everything. 7,000 years ago, a progenitor of the Xian family used some unknown method to ascertain the identity of that medallion during an auction in Black Ink Planet. It was a relic of the previous tribe leader of Dust Burners. At the same time, before the auction in Black Ink Planet ended, he experienced a sea of fire that surged into the sky when the fifth kiln was activated. That sea of fire might not have swept towards Black Ink Planet, but we could see that indescribable fire there. The color of that fire was dark, and it was the fire on the medallion. Xian Shang said calmly. The fifth kiln is related to dust burners? A glint appeared in Su Ming's eyes, and he looked towards Xian Shang. It's definitely related. Xian Shang nodded. That's why over the years, the true guards of the Xian family have been searching for the path to dust burners in secret. After using thousands of years and several generations of true guards searching for it, we finally found a fragment of the map. There are some clues about the inner parts of Divine Essence Star Ocean marked on it, and there's also the mark of dust burners, Xian Shang said slowly while looking at Su Ming. Dust burners are one of the 4 venerated races, and they have a master of fate, lives, and death among them. On what basis do you think you can go there? Su Ming asked faintly. Because the first progenitor of the Xian family had a personal relationship with a person from true Sacredine world in the past. That person gave Xian family's progenitor a supreme treasure, and even a master of fate, lives, and death would not be able to find any clues when that supreme treasure is hidden. The symbolic meaning of this treasure is greater than its use. With this treasure, the Xian family will be able to exist for tens of thousands of years in true Sacredine world, and no one will dare to easily snatch this treasure. Besides the fact that this supreme treasure is connected to the Xian family by blood, the more important thing is that the person who gave us this treasure in the past is the current sublime paragon of true Sacredine world. Once Xian Shang finished speaking, he looked towards Su Ming. We also relied on fellow Taoist Hua's soul-sealing art, fellow Taoist Yun's aura-devouring transformation art, and fellow Taoist Nian's great wheel of time art. It's a pity that 3 of our fellow Taoists died, or else the 7 of us could work together and use the supreme treasure to connect us, and we could turn the 7 of us into one person. Xian Shang sighed. A brilliant light shone in Su Ming's eyes, and he smiled. You want to disguise yourself as a dust burner and blend into dust burners, right? And you should be the son of the previous dust burners tribe leader. If my guess is correct, your progenitor did not just obtain a plate in the past, but a corpse. Su Ming's words were calm, but once he said them, while Xian Shang's expression remained the same, a huge storm was raging in his heart. He cast Su Ming a deep look. This was the first time he had met someone who could discover the truth from the clues he had left behind in his words. It was just as Su Ming had said. What Xian family's progenitor had discovered in the past was a corpse, but he had not found one, but half of it. If that's the case, then besides hiding your presence, the supreme treasure of your Xian family can also change its form. Only by doing so could you not reveal any clues about your plan, Su Ming said faintly. Xian Shang smiled wryly and wrapped his fist in his palm towards Su Ming. He might not have spoken, but both of them already knew what was going on. As for the 3 cultivators beside him, there was wariness in their gazes as they looked towards Su Ming. This wariness was not because of Su Ming's level of cultivation or his strength, but because of how meticulous his thoughts were. I wouldn't dare hide it from you, Senior. This is indeed what I thought. This is also the only way for us to blend into dust burners after the members of the Xian family concluded it over the generations. After all, we do not have a master of fate, lives, and death in the Xian family. That's why we gathered our old friends from the other true worlds. There were 7 of us in total, and we stepped into the barren lands of divine essence 3,000 years ago. We prepared for a long time, and once we worked together perfectly, we entered the inner parts of divine essence Star Ocean. It's a pity that we still ran into dangers we could not avoid on the way, and 3 of our fellow Taoists died, Xianshang said slowly with an anguished expression. But since we managed to run into you, Senior, we have a greater chance of success in this trip. With you around, based on our plan, we will definitely be able to come into contact with the secrets of the 5th kiln. In fact, there is a high possibility that we will be able to enter the 5th kiln. A hint of resolve and expectation appeared in Xianshang's eyes. Su Ming looked towards Xianshang. He could tell that there were some truths in this person's words, and some lies. There were also some parts that he did not say. This was understandable. After all, if he had told everyone everything, then with his intelligence, he would not have been able to live up to this point, and it would have been impossible for him to have the power of those in the later stage of world-plane realm. How should we distribute them? Su Ming asked faintly. He had asked this question because he wanted to find out just what sort of treasure was in the 5th kiln. After all, besides the 5th stone, Su Ming did not know what else was in there. However, based on the 4 people's determination, it was clear that there was some sort of item that they were determined to obtain. Senior, do you have any specific items that you want? Xianshang immediately asked, avoiding Su Ming's question. It was clear that he did not want to say what they wanted. Su Ming smiled and did not continue asking questions. Instead, he spoke in a resolute tone. I only want the 5th stone. Xianshang immediately nodded. The other 3 people beside him also let out sighs of relief in their hearts. They might not have interacted much with Su Ming, but based on their instincts, Su Ming did not seem like someone who would go back on his words. As for the 5th stone, while they also wanted it, compared to their true goal, this item could be ignored. Then, a smile appeared on Xianshang's face, and he quelled the excitement in his heart. He knew that their chances of success will be greater this time. Just as he was about to say something, Su Hui suddenly chuckled softly beside Su Ming. I want the Rouge Jade. When she said these words, the expressions of Xianshang and his group immediately changed slightly. What? Is it not worth it for me to join you with my level of cultivation? Su Hui asked with a smile. Xianshang smiled wryly and looked at Nian Yin. Nian Yin remained silent for some time before he gritted his teeth and nodded. The Rouge Jade was one of the 2 items he desired. When the bald crane saw that Su Ming and Su Hui had obtained benefits, it immediately became spirited and shouted loudly. And your grandpa crane? I want crystals. A lot of crystals. Once it finished speaking, to increase its persuasiveness, it moved and turned into Su Ming. Then, it moved again, and by the looks of it, it wanted to turn into Su Hui. However, when Su Hui looked at it with a smile, the bald crane's heart let out a thump. Halfway through its transformation, it stopped and quickly turned into Xianshang. After a moment, its body continued changing. Yin Yu, Hua Yu, and Nian Yin appeared on the bald crane's body. In fact, it even turned into a heaven traverser. What do you think? With me joining you, it should be worth a few 100 million crystals, right? In the end, the bald crane looked at the dumbfounded Xianshang and his group with a smug look. I'll give you all the crystals in it. Excitement appeared on Xianshang's face. The bald crane's transformation could be considered to have completed the final part of his plan to sneak into dust burners. Monday, please give me recommendation tickets. I haven't gotten any monthly votes yet, and I really can't bring myself to keep asking everyone for them. Recommendation tickets are free here, and I'm urgently asking for recommendation tickets. To be continued. If you like this work, please come Achidian. Come to give me recommendation tickets and monthly votes. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 1069. The area around the core of the inner part of Divine Essence Star Ocean was very quiet. From the distance, the place looked empty, but the dazzling light spilled out from the emptiness, causing the place to be in a state of matchless beauty. It was rare for cultivators to come to this place, or rather, over the course of countless years, there were very few cultivators who could reach this place. Even Su Ming and Su Hui would have found it difficult to reach this place if they did not have the map from the 9th tribe. As for Xian Shang and his group, they had also gone through a lot of trouble to reach this place. After all, they had been preparing for thousands of years, but even so, they had turned from the initial 7 to the current 4. Based on the incomplete map in my hands, we will reach Dustburner's territory in a month. That's why we have to make some preparations here. Xian Shang looked at Su Ming. This is the supreme treasure of the Xian family. It can contain several people inside, and it can change its appearance at will. With this Paragon Crane's transformation, at the very least, there won't be any flaws in its presence and appearance. As Xian Shang spoke, he lifted his right hand, placed it in his mouth, and bit down. Immediately, blood seeped out of his finger, and he formed a seal with his right hand. After a moment, he pushed his hand forward, and the blood on the tip of his finger immediately changed to turn gold. It turned into a drop of golden blood that flew out. Before the crowd, it shone with a golden light and swelled up swiftly to the size of a fist. My fellow Taoists and seniors, offer up your blood so that this supreme treasure of the Xian family will remember your presences. By doing so, it will be able to contain all of you. There will be no danger in this. I might not dare to say that I am an upright person, but I am definitely not a despicable person. You do not have to worry, Xian Shang immediately said in a low voice. The cultivator, called Nian Yin, was the first to bite his fingertip and fling out his blood. His blood charged towards the golden drop of blood, and once it touched it, it fused with it. Immediately, the golden ball of blood swelled up again as if it was boiling. This time, it swelled up to the size of a head. It was still golden inside, but it could be clearly seen that there was a faint hint of golden light on Yin Yin's body, as if there was some sort of connection between him and the ball of blood. It was the same for Xian Shang. Yin Yu hesitated for a moment before he bit the tip of his finger and offered his blood. A moment later, the golden ball of blood doubled in size, and a golden glow appeared on Yin Yu's body. Huai was the last of the 4 to offer his blood. His blood was different from the others. It was red with a hint of blue, almost purple. As soon as his blood fused with the golden ball of blood, the ball of blood began to churn violently. It expanded to the height of a person before stopping. Seniors, Xian Shang looked towards Su Ming and Su Hui. I'll go first. Su Hui smiled. Before Su Ming, she flung her finger forward, and the blood from her fingertip fused into the golden ball of blood. She was in lunar Kulpa realm, and when her blood touched the golden ball of blood, it instantly caused it to surge to an unprecedented degree. This scene caused Xian Shang and the other 3 to focus their gazes on it, but they were not too surprised. Clearly, the size of the ball of blood would be determined based on the level of cultivation of the person. The golden ball of blood swelled up swiftly. In the blink of an eye, it grew from the height of a person to 100-something feet big. It floated in front of the group, and golden light shone from within, causing all the people besides Su Ming to look as if they had been draped in a golden cloak. This is a form of acknowledgement. Once it fuses with your blood, you will obtain the protection of this supreme treasure. There won't be any problems. Su Hui closed her eyes. After a moment, when she opened them, she looked towards Su Ming. Su Ming stared at the ball of blood that was 100-something feet big. After remaining silent for some time, he bit the tip of his finger and offered up his blood. This was the blood of his cultivation-based clone, but it contained the presence of his clone that practiced the art of swallowing hollow shadows whole, and his Akang clone. This blood looked incredibly normal, but at the instant it appeared, the golden ball of blood that was 100-something feet big started trembling. This trembling was not due to excitement. It gave all the people in the area the feeling that it was trembling due to fear. This change stunned Xian Shang and the other 3. Su Ming flung his blood forward and charged towards the golden ball of blood that was 100-something feet big. Immediately, the golden ball moved back, but Su Ming's blood looked as if it had been attracted to it. As if it possessed intelligence, it increased its speed, and before the group could react to what was happening, his blood touched the golden ball of blood. A shrill scream of pain tumbled out of Xianshang's mouth, followed by Yunyu, Nianin, and Huayu. Even Su Hui's face instantly turned pale, and pain appeared on her face. During that instant, they immediately sensed a powerful impact coming from their souls. This was the golden ball of blood dispersing once it sensed danger. "Senior, what are you doing?" Xianshang's face was stark pale, and he immediately cried out in a shrill voice. Su Ming stood there with a frown on his face. He had not done anything. He had only sent out his blood, but he did not expect that the golden ball of blood would act in such a manner. Right then, his blood had already completely fused into the golden ball of blood, but a powerful force of rejection had appeared within it. This force of rejection was the golden ball of blood trying its best to push Su Ming's blood away. But Su Ming's blood seemed to possess a powerful devouring nature. The more it rejected his blood, the more it seeped into its core. "I didn't do anything. This supreme treasure of yours doesn't allow my blood to fuse with it," Su Ming said flatly. He could vaguely sense that this was related to his inborn ability as an abyss builder. Even a single drop of his blood contained a powerful possession power. Perhaps it was also related to his Akang clone. After all, even the sublime paragon of true sacredine world might not be able to compare to Akang in terms of life and death, much less when it came to an enchanted treasure he had created. Xianshang's expression changed several times. The Xian family had used this supreme treasure many times, but they had never run into something like this. He gritted his teeth and threw his senses towards the treasure. He could tell that Su Ming's words were true. The supreme treasure was indeed rejecting his blood violently. Damn it! Xianshang immediately used his unique heart art to control the supreme treasure so that it would not reject his blood and would instead allow it to absorb it. A supreme treasure was also an enchanted treasure. As long as it was a treasure, even if it had a spirit, it would still have a master. That was why this supreme treasure of the Xian family had gradually fused together in the midst of the continuous rejection due to the Xian family members intentionally suppressing it and the power of possession contained in Su Ming's blood, as well as the powerful offensive nature. At the instant it completely fused together, a powerful bang exploded in Xianshang and the other three's ears and echoed in Su Hui's heart. The golden ball of blood swelled up at that moment. In the blink of an eye, it became several thousands of feet big, and its color instantly changed from gold to black. That black color seemed to be the color of the galaxy, as if it could fuse with it and disappear. Xianshang's face was pale, and there was disbelief and incredulity on his face. The Xian family had used this supreme treasure many times, but only this time had its color changed to black. For some unknown reason, at the instant he looked at that black color, a boundless malevolent feeling rose in his heart. This feeling was the same as the first time he looked at Su Ming. Compared to the other people's dumbfounded and shocked expressions, Xianshang's heart let out a loud thump. After all, this was the Xian family's enchanted treasure. His understanding towards his treasure was incredibly deep, and he knew clearly that the color of the blood would determine who it would belong to once it was absorbed. He was originally confident that even Su Ming and Su Hui would be assimilated by this supreme treasure. He might not be able to control it, but he could only provide them with their cultivation bases. He was the core that decided the transformation of the supreme treasure. However, as the golden blood turned black, even though he could still sense that the treasure was connected to his blood, he had a feeling that it was listening to someone else's words, even though it was his possession. In anguish, when he looked at Su Ming, his gaze was filled with wariness and fear that was even greater than before. Su Ming stared at the black ball of blood, and after a moment of pensive silence, he smiled. "Me too. When the bald crane saw that the others had already done this, to prevent itself from being left behind and losing the chance to obtain crystals, it immediately let out a loud roar. It was an illusory body, and this was something that no one besides Su Ming knew. The bald crane did not even blink. It bit the tip of its finger, and its blood flew out to fuse into the ball of blood before disappearing without a trace. It might have looked as if it had fused with Su Ming, but all of this was fake. There was a connection between the bald crane and Su Ming's soul, which was why even if it did not offer up its blood, it would still be the same. I have a general understanding of the principles behind this supreme treasure, but I will still need your help, fellow Taoist Xian. Su Ming looked at Xianshang. Xianshang smiled wryly. This feeling of having his control snatched away in a fair and square manner caused him to feel indignant, but he could not find a way to dispel his gloominess. Next, all of you will touch the ball of blood with your hands, and you will be absorbed into it. Then, the ball of blood will change. Xianshang put away his gloominess. Since this was the truth, then he could only continue walking down this path. Once he finished speaking, he was the first to walk to the ball of blood. He pressed his right hand on it, and his body immediately fused into the ball of blood. Yun Yu and the other two did the same. Su Hui turned her head around and cast a glance at Su Ming. With a gentle expression on her face, she also fused into the ball of blood. The last ones were the bald crane and Su Ming. As for the abyss dragon, Su Ming had already put away. As for the nether beast, it was scattered and allowed to step into the void in the galaxy to wait for its summons. When Su Ming fused into the black ball of blood, he immediately sensed that his body was surrounded by liquid. A strange connection swiftly rose in his heart. He could sense the existences of Xianshang, Yinyu, 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 and Su Hui beside him. He could sense that these people's power seemed to be able to gather together with just a single thought from him and show it to the world around him. In fact, they could communicate with each other through divine thoughts, and he could already know everything about them. If one compared the black ball of blood to a person's body, then at that moment, Su Ming and the others were 6 different souls in that body. To be continued. If you like this work, please come to Chidian. Come and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 1070. There were 6 souls in one body. Not every soul could control this body. At the same time, only one soul could do so. That soul was the main soul, and the other 5 served as support. Originally, due to the natural advantage of being the main soul belonged to Xianshang, but at that moment, as Su Ming's blood changed and the ball of blood turned black, the main soul became Su Ming. If a normal person had 6 souls in their body, then when the main soul controlled the body, the other 5 souls would be asleep. However, the black ball of blood they were in was formed by a supreme treasure, which was why when Su Ming became the main soul, the other 5 souls were also awake. They could see and sense. Besides not being able to control their bodies, everything else was normal. Xianshang might have lost his power to control the supreme treasure, but he was not too worried about being controlled by others. Forget about the fact that his level of cultivation was not Su Ming's opponent. If Su Ming wanted to kill them, he had plenty of ways to do so. Besides, he was not worried that Su Ming would covet this supreme treasure. There were far too many people who were greedy in true Sacredine world, but no one dared to do so. This was a sublime paragon's treasure. Without sufficient power, if anyone dared to touch it, they would just be causing trouble for themselves. Besides, even if he could not control this supreme treasure, it still belonged to the Xian family and was connected to them by blood. Because of that, as long as he wanted to, he could make this supreme treasure instantly disintegrate and make the people instantly scatter. With this sort of confidence, Xianshang felt much more at ease. When he sent his divine thought outwards, he formed a picture in the hearts of the people. Senior, think of this picture in your heart. My fellow Taoists, we need to do the same. Let's think of this picture together. Don't be distracted, and don't add anything else to your imagination. By doing so, The ball of blood we are in will turn into this." Qianshang's voice echoed in the people's hearts. Soon after, a person's image appeared in each of their hearts. It was a thin, middle-aged man. His face was fair, and his hair was crimson. His pupils were blue, and there were 9 balls of flames at the center of his brows that formed a brand in the shape of a ring. He wore a long bee skin robe, and his face was pale. His right arm was covered with 9 blue lines that were deeply imprinted into his flesh. They flickered as if they contained flames. There was a huge wound on his chest. At this moment, the wound had rotted a little. It was obvious that his injuries were extremely serious, and he was unable to heal himself. This is the image of a dust burner that the Xian family came up with based on the previous dust burner tribe leader's body and our understanding of them for nearly 10,000 years. We determined this person to be a descendant of dust burner's previous tribe leader. When he was born, his father died, and he drifted around the world his entire life. He brought his father's belongings with him in search of his race, and once he was heavily injured, he was swept into a relocation vortex. When he arrived here, he fainted. His injuries are too fake, Su Ming sent his thoughts to him. There are too many coincidences that happened when we were relocated to this place, Su Ming said. Senior, what do you mean? Qianshang immediately spread his divine thought outwards. He has your map in his hands, and he found this place through it. His injuries aren't on his chest, but on his entire body. Simulate his injuries based on my imagination. As Su Ming spoke, his divine thought changed, and the middle-aged man's chest wound immediately healed in the people's minds. There was only a faint scar, but there were countless wounds on his body that looked like they had been torn by sharp claws and were in the process of healing. Aside from that, there were also countless fine spots on his body. They were small holes that could not be healed, and it was easy to imagine that these wounds were caused by thin and long nematodes. There was also a long scar on his face. The appearance of this scar not only made him look slightly more ferocious, but also exuded a thick, ancient air. This person cannot fall unconscious. He has to be conscious and search for his race in this place, Su Ming said faintly. If that's the case, then there will be a lot of places where we will need to test him. Qianshang hesitated for a moment. He knew that it was slightly inappropriate for him to fall unconscious, but if he did not, he might expose himself right from the start. I'll control it, Su Ming said calmly. Qianshang thought about it for a moment, then gritted his teeth and chose to agree to it. Gradually, as the same picture appeared in the people's minds, the gigantic black ball of blood that was thousands of feet big immediately started tumbling about and shrinking. The bald crane's transformation art fused with the supreme treasure's transformation. As they complemented each other, it became even more perfect. As the black ball of blood shrank, the outline of a person was gradually formed. After about the time it takes for an incense stick to burn, what appeared in the galaxy was no longer a black ball of blood, but a middle-aged man covered in wounds. There was a scar on his face, and there was an ancient look on his face. There were 9 rings of flames at the center of the man's brows, and there were 9 blue lines on his right arm that looked as if they contained flames. He stood in the galaxy with his eyes closed. Several breaths later, his eyes flew open. His blue pupils were originally apathetic, but they instantly gained intelligence. Soon after, they turned into confusion. He was like a wanderer who had lost his home, unable to find the direction of his home. That kind of confusion was not shown clearly, but hidden in the depths of his heart. He stood silently in the starry sky, silently looking around. It was as if he could find some familiarity amidst the unfamiliarity. After a long while, he lowered his head and looked at his body, at the countless wounds on it. Some of them were healed, and some were not. The claw marks were left behind when he fought against waves of tears, and the small holes were left behind when he fought against an incredibly troublesome living being on his way to the inner parts of Divine Essence Star Ocean. There were even more wounds on his body. Some of them were external, and some were internal. However, these wounds that were riddled with holes did not seem to be important to him. The fatigue in his heart came from the fact that he did not have a mother, a father, or any other family members since he was young. He wandered around by himself, but his determination to search for his people accompanied him his entire life, and it turned into a fatigue that could not be melted away. Home, Su Ming mumbled softly, as if he was truly the orphan of dust burners who had finally found his home after experiencing far too many things. Not only was there confusion on his body, but there was also uncertainty, as well as a great wave of resentment. It was as if he was complaining about the unfairness of the universe and the fact that his people had forgotten about him. At that moment, the other 5 souls in his body were in dead silence. They could sense Su Ming's appearance and the changes in his body under his control, but the more it was like that, the more shocked they became. It's too similar. This feeling, this is it. Letting you control, this is the right thing to do, Senior. If it was me, it would have been difficult for me to do it so perfectly. Xianshang was incredibly excited. He watched Su Ming control the body and sensed its expression. That feeling was so real that it would be difficult for anyone who had never truly experienced it to imagine how they would express it. Su Ming stared at the galaxy in the distance. The confusion in his eyes slowly disappeared, and the uncertainty in his heart was also forced down. A hint of resentment appeared in his eyes, and he took a step forward. He was incredibly fast, and in the blink of an eye, he charged forward. The 9 blue lines on his right hand instantly spread out into a blue sea of fire. At the same time, they surrounded his entire body. They also spread out under his feet, causing him to be so fast that he disappeared without a trace in the blink of an eye. Su Ming maintained this high speed of circulation. He was not the only one who provided the energy for the body, but the 6 of them shared it. In fact, Su Ming could sense that the combat power that could erupt from the body had become incredibly shocking as the 6 of them fused together. It could erupt with a power that surpassed that of Solar Culpa realm. In fact, it was infinitesimally close to that of a Master of Fate. And this was because Su Ming had not fused with his Akang clone, or else, even though he would not be able to reach the level of a Master of Fate, lives, and death, he could still make the body's combat power surpass his strongest. In fact, he could even make existences in Mastery Realm who had not mastered Fate Realm frown and feel that it would be difficult for them to fight against him. Su Ming's speed far surpassed his own by a large margin. This was the speed of the 6 of them fusing together. This was not a normal fusion, but a superposition of their speed. The terror of this superposition was the main reason why this supreme treasure had been able to create the Xian family. Su Ming's speed instantly reached a speed that could be compared to shifting. In fact, as he moved forward, for the first time, he did not notify the Duke of Crimson Flame. Instead, with just one thought, he shifted an endless distance. This explosive speed surpassed Xianshang and the others' expectations. They had judged that the journey would take them a month, but with this speed, they could reach it in half a month. Time trickled by, and days went by. As Su Ming moved forward, he was like a burning shooting star in the galaxy. With loud bangs, he sliced through endless ripples, and half a month passed by in the blink of an eye. On this day, it was the 16th day, Su Ming had moved forward. An endless layer of fog that filled the air appeared in front of him. At first glance, it looked like fog, but if anyone took a closer look, they would find that it was not fog at all. It was a sea of fire in the form of fog. Before it even got close, a wave of heat that could burn a person's entire body came crashing into his face. Su Ming did not stop. He charged towards the fog, and there was resentment hidden in his eyes, along with a wave of murderous aura. With that murderous aura, he took a step forward, and he was so quick that in the blink of an eye, he turned into a long arc that charged into the distance. Xianshang and the others immediately sensed that murderous aura. After being momentarily stunned, they immediately sent their divine thoughts to Su Ming. Only Su Hui had a pensive look on her face. "Senior, please put away that murderous aura. This is... Senior, what are you doing?" "Noisy." Su Ming's divine thought echoed in the air calmly. Not only did he not stop, he instead became even faster. With a bang, He rushed into the fog that was the sea of fire. At the instant he stepped into it, he immediately sensed the air around him distorting. This was the true distortion of space under extreme heat. Dust burners, come out! While in the fog, Su Ming immediately threw his head back and roared. There was resentment in that roar, as well as a will to throw caution to the wind, along with a wave of sorrow and ancientness. Seeking recommendation tickets to be continued. If you like this work, please come Achidian. Come and vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. That you're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.